Sloppy Spoilers with your host, DT2. What's up, y'all? DT2 Comics Chat here, ready for another episode of Sloppy Spoilers. Now, on this episode, we're going to be talking about Doctor Strange 2, the Multiverse of Madness. And holy cow, is there a lot to say. This movie exists on many levels in terms of its themes, in terms of what it wants you to buy, in terms of its storytelling, in terms of the cameos, in terms of realized potential and wasted potential. There's so much here. So we're going to get right to it. Let me bring on my co-host. Welcome to David, Nemesis Howard.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Once again, happy to be with you all. Looking forward to talking about this movie. I also point out real quick, it's here. Object number 1, out from ASAP Imagination, just came out. So I'm very excited and proud of that. But enough of that. I'm looking forward to talking about this. This is a movie I enjoyed to look at, but man, I got a lot of problems with it from an intellectual level. So
cool. All right, let's bring on Dr. Steve Shadewing Sellers.
Hi, this movie, I would say, doesn't really deserve the title that it has. And in fact, it should have been called Wanda Villain, because that is exactly what this movie focuses on. It's Wanda going completely off the rails into irredeemable territory and all of that. And I hate beating on this film because I really love Sam Raimi. I'm a huge fan of The Evil Dead, all of those sorts of things. But and I will say everything that I like about it is probably Sam Raimi. But there's also a lot that I don't like about it, and that's the script. And we're going to get into where the script didn't quite work soon enough.
Lots of details to discuss. Let's bring on Jeff, Dr. Fate Bracey.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar boat to Steve here. And in honor of this film being a horror movie, I am wearing my Five Nights at Freddy's t-shirt and my Freddy Krueger hat. And I can't help but think that somewhere in the multiverse is a version of this movie that is actually good, but I have yet to find it.
It's probably the one where Raimi wrote as well as directed.
Yeah, that would be the biggest difference.
And we have a guest today. We want to bring on our special guest, the Zigster himself, Mr. Joffrey. Come on, Zig.
Hey, it's Ziggy. It's nice to see everybody. I actually have a different take on this movie. I think the first half is horrible, but the second half is great, and the second half couldn't be great without the first half being horrible. So we'll talk about it.
Now
banish him.
We're gonna get to it. All right. So as usual, we're going to start off with general takes. Now, I'm already going to confess I'm not going to remember everything I want to say, so I'm just going to start out with some general stuff, and some stuff is going to hit me, I'm sure, as we go. My overall take on the movie is normally what I have to do is I have to sit with something for a few days, and I kind of have to marinate on it. I kind of have to kind of wrestle with it because there's a lot to absorb and there's a lot to process. So when I first saw it, I thought it was kind of interesting. The best part for me was the cameos. But as I continued to digest it, there were a couple of points in the movie that completely threw me out of it. And if you know me, you know once the movie throws me out of it, it's very hard for me to get back in. Once it becomes so ridiculous and so stupid, I can't re-engage. And so a couple of points like that happened for me in the movie. But the overall thing that kind of makes this a bit of sour milk for me is what the movie is asking you to accept. It's asking you to accept so many things that I find completely unacceptable, like the incompetence of the former Sorcerer Supreme, like the omnipotence of the villain, the so-called villain, yet somehow that there's no responsibility there. It does the same thing that WandaVision did. At the end of all the destruction caused, it focuses on Wanda. My focus is on the victims at the end of WandaVision, because I thought about what if I was somewhere and someone interrupted my lives with my children for however many weeks because they were upset about losing theirs. And Monica Rambeau says, they'll never know what you gave up for them. Really? So you just made Wanda the center of the universe and all them other people don't count. That's the same thing this movie does. that when it's all said and done, what counts is Wanda's grief, Wanda's feelings, Wanda's arc, and Wanda's solutions. My response after processing that was, what about all the people that were hurt in the wake of what she did? I personally can't get past that. Thing number one. Thing number two, I said it before we started recording, and that is that every time you tell this same story, and a Superman story, it's always an evil Superman story. So it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. In A Justice Gods Among Us, the Joker tricks Superman into thinking that Lois is Doomsday. So he takes her up into outer space until she dies. Then the spell wears off and Clark sees it's actually his wife and she was pregnant. So he actually killed Lois and the unborn child. So he comes back to Earth, and that's when he sticks his hand through the Joker's heart. And that's what begins the story in Injustice Gods Among Us. So every time we have the loss of Lois or anything that will push Clark to the edge, it's always an evil Superman story. But the point I'm trying to make is that that's never in question. When Superman gets in his feelings after a great loss, whatever kind of damage or destruction he does, everybody says you can't do that. That's wrong. We understand you're hurting, but that doesn't give you the right to do what you did. It's never even a debate. But with Wanda, it's this thing that baffles me, the way people defend her. So those are the two things that were like just stuck in my head after watching the movie. I'm like, it's always all about her, and her actions are somehow defendable because my feels. You don't understand my feels. And I was like, well, when Superman gets in his feelings, he doesn't get to rampage through worlds. Justice League Animated or Unlimited, A Better World. And Superman is tired of Lex Luthor, tired of the endless cycle. So he kills him. And then they become the Justice Lords. And quickly, the Justice League devolves into totalitarianism. And the Batman of both worlds say, this isn't right. Once again, I don't see a debate, only with Wanda. Okay, so that's me. So I'm sure I'm going to have more to say as we go. So let me have your overall thoughts, and then we'll get into details. Start with Nims.
Yeah, my issue really, well, first of all, I'm just going to say this. I thought that this movie was beautiful as a general rule. I thought it was a very beautiful movie. I thought it was a well-shot movie. I thought the CGI was pretty darn good, to be honest with you. Some of the new concepts they did, I didn't mind. I saw some people complaining about the fact that suddenly, like, Strange had a, Spectre cloak at one point. Spoilers for everybody. It's like, yeah, but we're dealing with multiverses. There's all sorts of things you could do. My issue is twofold. First of all, at the beginning, there's layers to this, but this sums it up real quickly. At the beginning, they called this movie Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Is this really a Doctor Strange movie? I really don't think it is. I think this is WandaVision Part 2 with some American Chavez thrown in, and Doctor Strange is the plot vehicle to move the story along so that Wanda can fight and have her finishing arc from WandaVision. That's what I really think this was. So I don't think it was really a Doctor Strange movie, and I think it's kind of disservice because, to be honest with you, Doctor Strange is one of my favorite characters in Marvel, period, because he's just so out there, and there's so much crazy stuff you could do with him. And I think it's kind of a waste. So there's that. The second part was, I've never been a big fan of Wanda in the MCU. And this is going to be controversial for a lot of people. I think she's been a villain and never has stopped being a villain, always. Because, and it is strange because in most incarnations of Pietro and Wanda together, it's Pietro who is the one who has anger issues, and Pietro is the one who is more likely to do villainous things, and Pietro is the one who's trying to show off for his father. It's Pietro is the one who's really pretty evil, and the Ultimate Universe did it a little bit differently, but even then Pietro was a freak. He was a perv. So here, I don't think Wanda has ever been in control of her emotions. I don't think she's really ever acted heroically, and I could defend that if we want to go into that. The first time we meet her in Age of Ultron, I would say that when she really used her power, it was not to save people. It was more about anger and grief over the loss of her brother. And I think it's just kept going from there. So I've never been a big fan of Wanda and what they've done with her. And then after what happened in WandaVision, it really just confirmed that even more in my mind. So it really, I guess the big problem I have here is, and even at the end of this movie, her so-called redemption where she sacrificed herself, I don't really see it that way. I see it much differently. So I think that's the big thing that really takes me out of this movie and takes me out of this idea, and especially for a lot of people out there, and this is external to the movie, that somehow this is a way to set up Wanda's return and a redemption arc. And I'm like, okay. So, it just kind of blows me away.
Okay. Steve, overall thoughts?
If they're trying to set up a redemption arc, this is probably the worst possible way they could have done it, because, I felt like if they were going to do a redemption arc, it should have been in this movie, because we've already seen that she's already got a lot to make up for with what happened with Rescue. I mean, which even acknowledges it in the scene that she has with Strange early on, when she's trying to pretend to be, trying to have a quiet life at that point. And so, but basically we see that she just goes full on psychotic, where it's like, at first she may make motions like, okay, I'm trying to be reasonable. Her way of being reasonable is essentially to commit atrocity after atrocity in Camartage. How many people did she slaughter to get through there? And then going into another reality and causing all kinds of trouble there, including killing the Illuminati, including, all the breaking of reality, more or less, and, just generally causing an incursion. And all of this is on Wanda. And why is she doing this? I mean, she says it's for her kids, but the thing, and I can completely, from an emotional point of view, can sympathize, with the idea of, okay, she's a mother who's lost her children. She'll do anything to get them back. And I'm sure that that's something that's a primal instinct, and that's why she has so much fandom, out there for her. But at the same time, the way that she's taking this is to such an extreme, you can't root for her. Not at all. It doesn't justify all the murders that she's caused. It doesn't justify torturing a young girl for her powers, tormenting her across universe after universe. It doesn't justify all the people she had to kill at Carmartage. It doesn't justify any of it. I mean, she killed Reed Richards, who was trying to reason with her, and none of these people were trying to do anything violent to her. And what is her response? It's just to kill him. I mean, and you might say, well, okay, it's under the spell of the Darkhold, but she knew that when she got the book. Why is her first response not to, hey, Dr. Strange, can you help me, back, with this book and make sure that nobody gets corrupted by this thing? No, because that would be the heroic thing to do. And everything that she is doing is not about her kids. It is about easing the pain of having lost her kids and having lost Vision. I mean, that's all this is about. It's about her own emotional suffering and trying to ease her emotional suffering. Which, I mean, again, you can understand, wanting to do that, but not at the cost of God knows how many lives. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you expect me after this, to think that she can be redeemed? I don't think it's possible. Even if you try to retcon this as having been Chthon, it would come across to me as a cop-out. I don't think that there's any saving of Wanda whatsoever, unfortunately. I wouldn't go necessarily as far as Nem about it. I do think that there might have been some point at which, she could have been brought back from the brink, but there's certainly no way of doing it now. And I see any kind of, undoing her death at the end of this movie also as being a cop-out, trying to make her the star of a show. I don't see how you do that without a number of people tuning out just because they can't relate to Wanda and because this movie has cast a pall on the character. And I will also add that this is a case where people talk about comics accuracy and wanting to make everything comics accurate. And, generally we're on the side of comics accuracy for the most part. When they're good comics. When they're the comics that brought us into the characters and capture the characters correctly, yes, we want comics accuracy. You know what we don't want? Accuracy to bad comics. And that is exactly what happened with Evil Wanda. This character has been derailed ever since Bendis' Avengers, ever since House of M. She has not been a consistent character since then. She's gone back and forth from hero to villain to whatever. She was a much more consistent character before then. There were issues with Byrne, but it had been straightened out by Avengers Forever. By that point, that she was a character on the road to recovery. And then basically Avengers Disassembled and House of M put the knife through her heart, and she has not been the same character since. and this is the character we're getting in the MCU. And I don't like it. I don't like it. Even with a good movie like Shazam, which which is otherwise a very good movie. The problem really is that it drew on very bad source material. And so any of the flaws that are in the movies because it chose the wrong source material, because it's not using the proper Captain Marvel. And that is exactly what happened with the Scarlet Witch. And I feel like this character casts a pall on the entire movie, which is a shame because I think Sam Raimi's directing is great to watch. There are so many, it is a visual treat in so many ways. It looks beautiful. And I think that some of Raimi's ideas are very clever. Unfortunately, the script and the handling of Wanda particularly just absolutely brings down the movie, and I just don't see any way that Wanda's going to get out of the shadow of this film.
Just be thankful you didn't get incest perv Pietro. That's all I'm going to say. So.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah.
Steve
It
said
could still
a
happen.
lot.
Oh no, he said it.
It still happened. That's true. Steve said a lot, and there's a lot we're going to deal with. The one thing I will say, and then I'm going to throw it to Muhammad, is that there's a difference between comics Wanda and MCU Wanda, and there's an accelerant in terms of her journey in the MCU that we had years to work through in the comics. But I also want to touch on, before I forget to say it, I also want to touch on what Steve brought out was another trope that really bothers me, and that is unexplained unlimited power trope. People can say that it was through the Darkhold, but her powers are not defined. That's one of the problems Wanda's always had in the comics, is that the chaos magic, first it was a thing, then Doctor Strange said it wasn't a thing, but the powers are never defined. So when you go from whatever power level you were at, what you had was telekinesis, what you had was mind manipulation, those we saw for sure. You go from that to a fifth level reality warper, then without a context. And that bothers me too, but I'll get more to that. Okay, Muhammad, what do you think?
So I see this entire film as being about loneliness and a lack of empathy. And I think that ultimately speaking, my problem with the first half of the movie was that it was exceedingly lonely. And so what that means to me is that you have all these characters that are sort of on screen together and barely that. And they're not talking to each other. They're not having conversations. Strange isn't talking to America. Strange isn't really talking to Wanda unless she's fooling him. These are sort of interactions where people are giving pronouncements, but they're not having conversations. And I just thought that felt horrible. And it didn't jive with what the characters have been before. It didn't fit with what we've seen in the Marvel universe throughout all of the history that we've seen so far, where these characters interact, they talk, they have conflict, but they sort of express each other and interact with each other. And that's how we get to know them in terms of how they talk to each other. And I was really upset about all of this as I was watching the film. And then as we get into the second half of the film and you realize that sort of lack of connection, that lack of empathy, that lack of interaction is really what the film's about, right? So Wanda is just an expansion of what Stephen Strange has already done. He's gone through Endgame and Infinity War, and he's allowed all these potential deaths to happen. And even though they got resurrected, he allowed all this death around him because it was for the greater good. He allowed all of this to happen, and he allowed Tony Stark to die. He knew these things were going to happen, and he did it for the greater good. And Wanda's just sort of a twisted version of that same thing. And really what the film's about is taking what you think is right and kind of your own sort of little pod here. And the multiverse is actually multiple perspectives, looking at other people's perspectives, understanding empathy, understanding how other people think, and that other people matter. It's not just the illusion of central position. It's not just yourself. It's that there's other people in this multiverse, even on this earth. There's sort of multiple perspectives, and really understanding that what we think and what we do has to somehow be in connection to others. And so, there's a whole string here about whether or not Doctor Strange can bow to Wong and how he interacts with Wong. There's a whole string about how he treats America, where at the beginning of the movie, his sort of alternate type is willing to just suck the power right out of her. And then, of course, in the end, he is willing to give her the power. And so, to me, the entire film feels disjointed because the first half is this incredibly lonely area of time. And then the second half, though, kind of pulls things together back into the MCU we know, where people are talking, people are interacting, they're acting like real characters again. Wanda starts to sort of understand that it's not just all about her, that there's other people in the universe, even though it's just herself, that there are other people in the universe as well. So I really got to enjoy this first half of the movie, but only through the context of where it leads to. And it's an interesting thing. It sort of reminds me of the Star Wars prequels, where some of the first episode isn't necessarily enjoyable unless it's in the context of the larger story. And to me, that's how this was as well. But I think that ultimately speaking, the one part that I can't get past is how disjointed Wanda's story is compared to what we saw in between. And it very much does feel like Age of Ultron. I think that's right on the money, that her character here is the Age of Ultron character, just kind of given to anger and given to this expansive sort of lack of empathy. And that's the character that we're seeing carry through. That's not a character we've seen in a long time. We've seen a much more empathetic, interesting character that was much more nuanced along the way. And all of that chunk, it almost feels like Sam Raimi didn't get to watch that part, that he didn't get to see her character development in between. So that was the part that felt the most disjointed to me, is that it didn't feel like the Wanda that I knew right now. It certainly felt like the Wanda that I know from Age of Ultron. Her character was sort of dead on, continuing from that arc as well. But I think ultimately, as far as Doctor Strange, I agree. The focus wasn't on him in the beginning, but it was all about him. If you go back and look at how they talk about what he did in Infinity War, what his attitude was towards his girlfriend, what his attitude was towards America, this is all just what Wanda's doing as well. It's just on a different level, right? She's taking it to an extreme. And that's sort of what these superhero films should be about. It's sort of what conflicts they're going through taken to an extreme. And we get to see the villain being sort of the extreme version of what our hero could become if they continue down that path. And so I really see Wanda as very much a reflection of what Stephen Strange sort of has been going towards if he doesn't turn around. And this movie is really about him turning around and making different choices. And ultimately speaking, Wanda does too, although to a lesser extent, in my mind.
Okay,
that's an interesting point. That's
it is. I agree with what Nim said. However, I would make the argument and agree with the argument that Wanda has always been fighting for what she cared about in the moment, which is not the same as being a hero. One. Two, I will repeat, Superman never gets that kind of slack. He's never a reflection of what we should be feeling or thinking about when he goes bad. He's just bad because he got in his feelings. Okay, Bracy.
Yeah, that's legitimate. Superman goes from being the big blue Boy Scout to being the most terrible villain of all of DC whenever he goes rogue. And it's like you said, he never really he never really it gets sold on that. Even when people join him in a Crisis or the whatever the hell it is. Thank you. Injustice. Whenever even the people who join him with that, even though they agree with him, I always get the vibe that they agree with him more out of fear than anything else. It's like, be on the winning side or get lasered in the face. Just ask Captain Marvel. So that sort of thing happens. So looking at WandaVision, my biggest takeaways right away is one, these are supposed to be superhero movies. Stan Lee always had the admission that these people are supposed to be better than us, and they're still human. That was the brilliance of what Stan and Steve and Jack all did with the characters. They humanized them, whereas the DC pantheon is a pantheon. They are veritably the gods of Olympus, and they are these flawless paragons, largely flawless. Modern comics addresses that to a degree, and unfortunately the pendulum swung way to the other end with the New 52 and made them unlikable. What we got here with Marvel, which was supposed to be the world outside your window, they're heroes because it's the right thing to do. And when Superman is written as best, and I loved it when he took on the Fatal Five or whatever they were called, with Manchester Black. Mm-hmm. He said, I do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
And that's what I appreciate mostly out of Marvel. You look at how Peter Parker could have easily become the bully once he acquired power. But unfortunately, he had a terrible event happen and realized it was his fault. What we get here with Wanda is we get somebody who cannot let go. From childhood, we have seen in WandaVision, she cannot let go. She cannot accept loss. She cannot accept this is the way of the world. And as soon as she gets power, she goes off the rails with it. And that's always her story, is that her unwillingness to let go, no matter what the cost. And I have to agree with Muhammad. It is a very lonely story. That's a major theme of this. You see it in Steven, you see it in her, and there's definitely a parallel going on there. And it's tragic, but unfortunately it's not tragic in a way that I could empathize with her. Muhammad had said something very interesting in the pre-show, is that we go from WandaVision, where we got to get into her psyche a lot more, and there was a lot there that you could identify with and empathize with and sympathize with. We don't get any of that here because we go straight to Wanda as the villain. We haven't seen the corruption of the Darkhold. That all happens off camera, and that sucks. It's just like everything that happened with the Hulk in the MCU is always being talked about. We never see it. Show, don't tell. There are times when you can tell as opposed to show, but in the majority of things, this is a visual medium. Most of the time, you want to show, not to tell. This could have been the movie where we see her fall from grace, where we see her have her Anakin to Vader kind of thing. And then the next movie, we set her up to be the MCU Phase 4 supervillain. That would have worked beautifully because we do have that arc due to some unfortunate writing choices from about the 90s on as far as Wanda went, and just never really corrected. Which is too bad because I always liked Wanda in the Avengers. I liked her and the Vision as a couple. There's a lot about those Avengers from the 70s and 80s I really liked, and I did like them in particular. The other thing that I took away from this film is, once again, these are supposed to be superhero movies, but there are no heroes. They spend all this time making a point of beating you in the face with it that Stephen Strange is a bad guy. Stephen Strange is not a hero. All Doctor Stranges are the same. They will always do the bad thing. Wanda tries to throw that in his face early on when he goes to talk to her. But unlike her, who's making decisions out of mourning and loss and pain and anger and frustration, he made his decision based on, I looked in 14,758,000 different timelines, and I only saw one way of winning. I took the only way where we win. It's the only way to get everybody back who is going to die regardless of what we do. Nothing is going to save half the universe. And that is not a villainous move. That was a sacrifice. And he knew what it was going to cost him as well as everybody else. And he paid that price. So in this film, not only is he dressed down as not being a hero, everybody in the film tells him what to do. From a teenage girl to his supposedly best friend to his ex-girlfriend to these heroes he's never met before. Everybody tells him, I feel like I'm watching Picard all over again. He just gets talked. Yeah, he just gets talked down to. I'm waiting for somebody like the sheer effing arrogance, and they all but say it because it's Disney. They're not going to drop the F-bomb, but it's like, wow. And fortunately, unlike Picard, he doesn't just sag his head and take it. He stands tall. It's like, you guys, you call me arrogant. You're all bragging about how you're going to stop Wanda, and she just makes mincemeat out of the lot of you. So we'll get into that scene, I'm sure. But I greatly dislike the fact that the MCU in Phase 4 has no heroes. They have gone into full Zack Snyder, Alan Moore deconstruction mode. There are no heroes. There are people like us who have power they probably shouldn't once you see how they use it and abuse it. The lack of hero is really... It's a terrible thing to see because growing up on comic books, this is kind of where a lot of us kids who are into this kind of thing, where we kind of first got our idea of hero. If you didn't start out reading books like, Red Badge of Courage or Where the Red Fern Grows or some of these other classics, Call of the Wild, even though the protagonist is a dog, you get this idea of courage and heroism and all these virtues, all the great classical virtues, prudence and all these things, and we're not seeing any of that. And it's pretty shameful, I feel, that there's, in the modern age, we don't really believe in heroes. Like, one of the most popular heroes we have right now is John Wick, and that dude's a freaking assassin. How many people has he killed? But we empathize with him because his wife's dad and his dog got killed. All right, whatever. It's great action. I love Keanu Reeves and all that. But the idea of hero is completely and absolutely corrupted, and is very evident in this film, which is disappointing. And I'll say one other thing. Disney, this is a big FU on this one. That is not Marvel 616 Doctor Strange. I don't care what this crappy movie says. That is not it. The Marvel Comics universe is 616, even as lame as it's gotten right now. And they have a designation. Marvel has a designation for the MCU universe, and it is not 616.
Right.
No. Bad Disney. Bad Disney. Take it back.
Iman Vellani was right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Jeff touched on is also just another trope that has been going on since Green Lantern Rebirth. Now, not that it's the first time that it's happened, because that's not true. Green Lantern Rebirth is what established it as a norm. And that's that all the lanterns do is fight each other.
Yeah.
Marvel universe we're used to, or that we like, but it's certainly what Marvel has been for the last 20 years in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you look at what Civil War II was and what that engine was and what that crossover was. That's exactly what we're talking about here, right? They're people that are fighting for almost no reason whatsoever. They're not really heroes anymore at this point. Everybody's kind of out for themselves and doing whatever they need to do.
Precisely.
I think that Marvel Universe has been that way since Quesada, right? I mean, since Spider-Man made a deal with the devil, since, we've gone through what we went through with House of M. I mean, all of these events kind of are things that people are reading. These are the big graphic novels that people are looking at when they're writing these things. You look at the people that wrote this movie, they're pretty green. They're pretty new writers, relatively speaking. And they're, we don't know what their comic cred is, but they're potentially going back and just reading the greatest hits and trying to reflect the greatest hits. And the greatest hits, the big crossovers that, we all kind of hate at this point, those are things that they're trying to reflect with this film, no question.
Yeah, but
sure, that's what they would have grown up with.
We blanked for a minute, so I don't know if you guys said it, but what it is the death of altruism. Yeah. It's the death of being able to do the right thing, or as Steve Rogers says in First Avenger and in Avengers, you're not the guy to make the sacrifice play. You're not the guy to lay down his life and let the other person crawl over you to survive, which he proved before he got his powers in the First Avenger. That's why he was chosen. So we're dealing with a generation that has no respect for that, has no use for that, has no understanding of that, and rejects it out of pocket, not understanding what Memorial Day is about. The only reason that you have any semblance of freedom in this country is precisely because of real people that thought like Steve Rogers.
Right.
And so without the altruism there, then it becomes narcissistic and nihilistic, and the heroes just turn on each other. And we begin to focus on the worst parts of them. And that's not the point, to me, of superhero escapism. The point is, I see somebody better than what we see. I see someone that has power that's not corrupted by it. I see somebody doing the right thing for the sake of others. That's always Superman and Captain America.
Right.
But it seems like they're the last two that have held on to that standard. Go ahead.
I do want to say a couple things about that, though. First and foremost, you can't watch Spider-Man No Way Home and then say that that's all that Marvel's interested in, right? I mean, that is the polar opposite, in my opinion, in terms of the death of altruism, sort of being separated, heroes fighting heroes. This is heroes helping villains and, redeeming villains.
Yeah, but I'd argue that's more Sony than the MCU.
but it's also a horror movie in terms of what their motivations are as well, and it's trying to cast it as that. It's not supposed to be good that these folks are acting like this.
I would argue, I don't know if you heard me before I blipped out, that that's what was good about Spider-Man. I would attribute way more to Sony than the MCU. And that's really the purpose of Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is a horror hero character. And so he should be that paragon that we see against the forces of outer darkness that are arrayed against our tiny little dimension.
Okay, but the Sorcerer Supreme is supposed to be protecting us with all that power. Okay? This Sorcerer Supreme is always doubting himself.
Well, he's not even the Sorcerer Supreme.
He's not Sorcerer Supreme. So
Juan's protecting us plenty.
Strange's arc has always been about overcoming his ego.
We have yet to see Doctor Strange be the Sorcerer Supreme in one of his own movies. We've got about 10 minutes of him being Sorcerer Supreme in a different movie. That's it.
The only thing I would say is that for me, Marvel has always been about, as characters get more power, they get more gray, because they have to make hard decisions, and oftentimes they get gray to the point of looking darn well black, like Namor or Black Bolt at times, or various people. Charles Xavier has done some pretty sketchy things. The problem,
but again, this is a modern trope. This is not the way it was in the 70s, 80s, or even in the 90s.
Yeah. But the problem I really have is that, okay, if you're going to do that, if you're going to say power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely, then there are consequences to that. Tony Stark is a drunk. He's all of these things, and he has to pay the consequences for that. And the same thing with the characters in the MCU. You can't suddenly have them be trumpeted as heroes. They have to other characters need to react to them, and the public at large needs to react to them based on what their actions have been. And I think that the MCU has tried to have it both ways. And I think there are people, I don't know if the MCU is going to actually do this, but there are people that want to have it both ways with Wanda after this as well. When really they want
to have Watchmen in a Silver Age world, and it's like you can't really do that.
And really, this version of Wanda should stay dead. If you're going to redeem Wanda, it should be a Wanda from a different universe. So
we're gonna start to go through the scenes of the movie, but to Nim's point, before we do that, I want to speak to a character that did it right, what Steve just said, and also what Nim just said, and that would be Xena. If you watch Xena's show, Xena was a villain. Xena was an immoral person. Xena was, bad chaos, whatever that thing is. I can't ever remember, chaotic evil or whatever. And over the arc of the series, Xena realized that she couldn't really make up for the evil that she'd done. So, spoiler alert, when she dies at the end, she tells Gabrielle, "Don't bring me back. Let me stay dead, because that's actually what I deserve." That's actually the right way to solve what's happening. See, now that is a much better example of what happens when you realize what you've done and you realize you need to pay. So people make the argument that Wanda realized that, but number one, Wanda's death is just like Superman's death in Batman vs. Superman. She's coming back. How is she not coming back? It's all over that she's going to get a solo movie. So, but anyway, let's get into the scenes. Then we can talk some more about the themes. So as the movie starts, one of the things that kicks me out of the movie is the beginning. And the reason that it kicks me out of the movie is because it is immediately, once we discover that Wanda's the villain, it immediately doesn't make any sense, and I'll explain. So Strange is having a dream, and then he meets America Chavez for real, and she says it's not a dream, and when you dream, it's actually a window to the multiverse, which I thought was a devastatingly interesting concept. We go a lot of places with that, but they didn't really follow up on that like they could have. But that concept is deserving of its own series or universe or something, that dreams are windows into the multiverse, other versions of you doing other stuff. That is, oh my goodness. So I thought we were going to go some more down that road. But anyway.
I think Marvel stole that from me because I wrote that short story about 15 years ago. So.
I've written that too.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So, they're meeting and he's got to save her. And of course, he's being humiliated watching Christine getting married. Now, I had this conversation with somebody, and once again, I know people see things differently. That's why me and Ziggy are friends. That's why me and Muhammad are friends. I love to hear what he has to say because we think so different, and I'm always challenged by that. But But I said I don't understand somebody that would go to the wedding of the ex they're still in love with. I can't wrap my mind around that. And this other person was like, "Oh, I know guys who do that all the time." I was like, "Really? Okay, well, I don't have no friends like that." So because so to me it was just like a punk move. I mean, it's just a chump move. Why you sitting there to go watch her get married to somebody else?
What's that phrase? He's a chimpanzee. That's your phrase.
He's a chimpanzee. That's right. It's just.
Can I just interject some reality real quick?
Go ahead.
Something like that happened just a little while ago. One of Britney Spears' exes tried to crash her wedding and got thrown right out.
True. That is true. That is true. But I'm not interested in watching Maxes get married, especially if I'm still very obviously in love with them and very obviously pining over the fact that it didn't work out with us. And now whatever. Do you need that in your memory bank? How does that?
And you got to be a masochist if that's what you want.
That's exactly what you took the words out of my mouth. So there's that.
No, it's not even that. He's trying to pick her up at her own wedding. He's like giving her drinks, and
he is. Yeah, he is. Muhammad hit him right on the head. He's giving her those stares. He's giving her those looks.
This magic wine is full of roofies.
Right. So did we really not work out? Can we talk about that?
Yeah, he's not done.
He's like, so what are you doing after the wedding?
Going on my honeymoon. So anyway, he has a great exit when he jumps out the window. That was great. Whenever the cloak comes up and lifts him up, and that was great. And we're going against Gargantos, which is Shuma Gorath, but they didn't want to pay the royalties. If you look up why that happened, because they didn't want to pay the royalties, because that was purely Shuma Gorath. That's the reason, by the way, we have a black Vulcan, because they didn't want to pay the royalties. Diet Shuma Gorath. So anyway, so that goes down, and they have this big fight. And and Strange is like, but that was something deeper. That was magic. I know somebody might be able to help. Blah 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 blah. Okay, let me throw this out. If Wanda could send multi-dimensional creatures across the multiverses to chase America, why does she need America?
Yeah.
So right off the bat, I'm like, wait a minute.
Right off the bat,
aren't you using transdimensional magic? Aren't you?
I had the exact same thought. If she can already send things back and forth, just go and grab those kids and come back. But was that some sort of like interdimensional gateway, and that's why she had access to it? It wasn't like another dimension in truth. It was sort of a gateway to other dimensions, and she couldn't quite cross through it, but she can kind of throw things.
Well, even then, she had the Darkhold, and so she obviously knew the spell that would let her, sleepwalk in somebody else's body. So she could have, in effect, been there calling those beings to do her bidding. So, the plot hole is enormous.
Okay, but the key is in how America defines herself. America says that I'm actually the only one of me that there is. There aren't multiverse doppelgangers of me. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, that means Wanda had to create those monsters and they could find her anywhere. That means they followed her everywhere because she said, I've been across 70 different realities. So if you can create something that chases her across 70 different realities, then why you need her? So there's that.
And she clearly has no problem tracking you from reality to reality. We see that.
How? Did you put a tracker like Reva put a tracker in Leia's little robot? So there's that. And then the second thing is when Wanda is quote unquote revealed as the villain, and they're having a conversation, and Wanda trips up and goes, why don't you just bring America here to me? I can keep her with me. And Strange just stops. And Wanda's like, you didn't tell me her name, did you? And he's like, no, I didn't. And all of a sudden the facade falls away, and it's like this evil, decadent, a wicked witch of the West, bleak, stripped kind of thing, because nature's bending to the fact that Wanda's corrupt and her sacrifice will be a necessary sacrifice. Okay. The thing about that threw me out of it was I'm like, wait just a minute. Wait just a blue-black minute. I'm trying to understand how, first of all, you didn't already, you didn't need to have a conversation. I know Strange went to you, but you would have known, if you know all the things you know up to this point, you would have known everything that was going to happen, and you could have avoided it. Which tells me that you wanted to go up against Strange. You wanted to go up against the other sorcerers. You wanted to do everything that you did.
Well,
wanted
but
to
Strange reveals where she's located in that scene. That's really what she was fishing for, right? She wanted him to come by and ask about it because she wanted to figure out where he was hiding her.
If she can track her across the multiverse, why does she need Strange to tell her?
Because that one little area is impossible to check. All right, that's the area that you can't find anybody.
I think we need to hit the rewind for a second, because my whole problem with that scene goes back a little bit further, where he pops in and she goes, "Are you here about the Westbrook thing or something to that effect?" He's like, "Oh no, we forgive you for that." I was like, "Whoa."
Yeah, we just wipe that one away.
I was like, "What? What was that?"
Okay, yes, that reminded me.
I mean, we've got bigger fish, but yeah, I was going to talk.
Well, yeah,
that reminded me of when President Obama said, "We don't look backwards, we look forwards," because people were expecting him to deal with a whole bunch of the "we went to the wrong country" kind of stuff, and he's like, "No."
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not only that, he forgives her for that.
I mean, Stephen Strange is one of the villains of the movie that is redeemed. So that is a villainous thing, to try to take advantage of somebody that you know has done something wrong. And instead of trying to address all the things she's done wrong, you're just like, how can I use you? Because I need your help now. I'm going to ignore all that other stuff. That's a bad trait, right? You're just kind of going to the bad guy and asking for help, even though you know they're the bad guy.
Okay, I think that's a good point. And I think that also the other point is that I think that shows why he's not the Sorcerer Supreme, because I'm pretty sure that's not what Wong would say. So in the case,
okay, but remember I said in my opening, there were the things the movie's asking you to accept. When you're asking the audience to accept that you don't care about the people of Westview that were hurt, but you do care about this one teenage girl. Now, I admit she has powers and all different kind of stuff, but what is where are the moral values? What is the frame by which you say all those other innocent people that you hurt? I can shrug that off. But now you're coming after America. I don't think I can sit with that, and we need to talk about that. And I need your help because she's the one girl that's the key to everything.
I think Wanda's trying to erase your body, DT. So.
She became MacGuffin Chavez
in the movie, but I mean, you could argue that, I mean, that, somebody like Wanda could use her and make her a threat to the multiverse, and Strange wants to head that off to the past before it becomes a problem. I can understand that.
I mean, I think
it's also. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Muhammad's point is well taken about Strange being a villain as well, which really begs the question of who the heck is a hero in this movie?
I told you, there's
since by the time
there are no heroes.
That's right.
There are no heroes in this film.
Yeah, because by the time we get to the end of the movie, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, so I'm not going to spoil it yet, but Strange did some things, and we leave it at the end with Strange where it's questionable whether he's going to stay a hero. So it's like,
anti-hero at best, but yeah.
So the movie should have done a better job. The one thing we did understand about Doctor Strange's choice was that he examined literally all the other choices and said, "This is the only way we win." Right. So as a continuation from WandaVision, which ending I hate it. They'll never know what you gave up for them. Really? There's no justice. There's no retribution. There's even no way to sue. Wanda just flies off. What if I lost wages from the times I was in Westview? What if I came back out and I found out my bank account's been affected? What if my child had some type of injury or event while I was gone and I wasn't there because I was busy being a puppet for your little personal play? There's no way for me to even sue. There's no way for me to address my grievances, and everybody agrees that poor Wanda. So you lost me. But then she flies off, and the last scene of WandaVision is her going through the dark hole. Now, I have been talking for the last 36 hours about people on Twitter saying she was under the influence of the dark hole. And I'm saying to myself, she went and got the dark hole. What is wrong with y'all?
Well, I think Agatha kind of tricked her into getting the dark hold, right? But I think what threw me off was when the dark hold gets destroyed, there's no clarity, right? As soon as she's got the dark hold with her, that dark hold, even though it's a copy, gets destroyed. She's not at Wundagore yet. She's not anywhere else.
Yeah, she's no longer in physical contact with it.
She's not. So there should be some degree of clarity at that point. There should be some break in the character where we get a little bit of sort of the normal Wanda, right? Lose the accent, be a little bit more like she's been in the modern times. That there should be some sort of break there. But instead, she just goes right on script. she's exactly the same character. And so if Darkhold's what's controlling her and it's solely Darkhold, why is that hold still on her at that point? Or is it just one of those things where until she destroys all the Darkholds, it's still got a hold on her, even though that one that she was holding on to was gone?
Well, MacGuffin magic.
Even going back to the point with WandaVision, though, it's like, that in the initial time when she enslaved the town for the first time, she wasn't under the influence of Agatha. Yeah. She wasn't under the influence of the Darkhold. That was all her, baby. So, it was like...
I will also add as a side note that it really turns Monica Rambeau into a case of criminal negligence for letting Wanda leave, knowing what she causes later.
Yeah.
I told you when we reviewed that series, that general was right. We should have killed Wanda. I mean, she was a pure.
They're proving him right, unfortunately.
As long
as awful.
As long as you don't blame Darcy. As long as you don't blame Darcy.
Yeah, I blame Darcy. All you want.
And this movie suffered from them excising Doctor Strange from WandaVision. It would have made this a much more poignant film. It would have made a much more clear narrative, and the relationship between the characters that Muhammad has illustrated would have been much better, more defined, and more relatable. It's a shame that they cut him out.
Nims has been talking about it, and Muhammad is talking about it now, so I must reiterate that if you are going to create the rules of a story world, we need to know what they are, and then they need to be consistent. We don't have a problem using our suspension of disbelief to enter into the story world once you define it. But when it's nebulous, and when it's unclear, and when it changes as the plot requires, then that's going to throw some people out of what you're doing. And some people were like, you're just being nitpicky or whatever. I'm like, no, I'm actually a writer. I'm looking for a through line. I'm looking for motivations. I'm looking for the rules of the world. I'm looking for them to be consistent. Otherwise, the story is a bunch of scenes strung together. It's not actually a story.
Yeah, it's almost like this makes sense if you ignore WandaVision, but it makes no sense if you ignore WandaVision, because then you don't even know she has kids, right?
Like, I think you hit on something there, Ziggy, and I think the reason I say this is because I think Sam Raimi kind of knew, or the writer of this wrote this independently, with only having read like the bare basics of WandaVision, or maybe being given a treatment.
He read the Wikipedia.
And this was written separately. Yeah.
He read the Wikipedia, yeah.
I will also say, though, that Wanda... The magic powers in general in the MCU are just all over the place. But in this movie in particular, we're talking about Wanda having her kids back. Well, at certain points of this movie, she exhibits alternate or reality altering powers to a level where she could just create as many kids as she wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Not to mention that when she's fighting Doctor Strange and she's at the height of her powers with the Darkhold, I mean, she unzipped. She destroyed the Illuminati, and she did it rather easily. So it's like what?
And she wasn't even in person.
I mean, she made these kids out of nothing. Why can't she just make another town out of nothing? Why does she?
I want to address that when we get to the thing about her kids. I have some points to make about the kids. My theory on that.
We'll get there in a minute. So basically, what happens after that opening, is that it becomes a chase movie. So it becomes one long chase movie where basically. Wanda and Doctor Strange in America are at various stages of trying to flee from her, and she basically becomes like the Wicked Witch of the West coming after Dorothy, and Strange is the protector, just to kind of boil down what happens after that opening. Now, I feel the opposite of what Muhammad said. I feel like up until that point, because he said the first part of the movie was bad and the second part was great, I felt the first part was incredible up until that point, because it has so much potential. I thought this movie is really going to crush because, Wanda's evil and all this stuff is finna go down, and so many different things can happen from this point, and Strange was legitimately concerned and all that kind of stuff. So even though my mind couldn't get past, why couldn't she hop dimensions already if you can send monsters to hop dimensions, or whatever, I thought we were going to get, but after that it becomes kind of this chase thing. And so and she's throwing out all what I call the Stallone lines, Schwarzenegger lines. Yeah. You better to give her to me. It won't be Wanda that comes for her. She's a Scarlet Witch. I'm like, hold on. So, so she's throwing them, Rambo lines out like, oh, okay.
You're the disease and I'm the cure.
Yeah. So when she goes up, however, Strange has, ran his mouth and said where she is, but you should know where she is because you knew where she was 5 dimensions away when you sent the one big eyeball after her. But anyway, so she goes against the Magic Mountain sorcerer. We're all ready for you. We do the clap, clap, sorcerer circles, and everybody's out there, and we're going to fight Wanda and everything. And so, silly me, I thought it was actually going to be a fight.
Yeah.
And so, I would have liked, in that scene, for it to not have been so easy for Wanda. They're trying to have a conversation, and Strange is like, you need to be reasonable. She's like, that was me being reasonable. This is me being reasonable. Okay, so what that means is that I actually could have killed y'all at any time. I'm actually about to slaughter you now. I actually could have gone nuclear a while ago, but I was trying just to get America and just kill her.
Right.
So I can get to a dimension for my kids. And then, because she does say in that original conversation, it's not that she just wants her kids back. She wants to leave this dimension. That's the one part that I thought was legit. In this dimension, her brother's dead, her husband's dead by her hand, and her fake kids are gone, and she's in a lot of trouble. So she said, I don't just want my kids. I want to go to another reality and start over. So I understood that. That's what I mean by a through line for the motivation. That's how you write a character's motivation. But when she gets to the castle of magic, and it's sorcerer after sorcerer and different apprentices and Padawans, and they got the lightsabers and the circles and the Jedi Masters, everybody, and Wanda's laughing at her.
Right.
It wasn't a fight, it was a slaughter. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, hold on, once again. I'm like, if you've got that kind of power, if she wasn't, well, maybe evil's too strong of a word. But if you really just wanted America, you could have done a few simple things, zipped in into where she was and left with her.
Right. She was making a statement.
Right. But right. But she didn't do that.
Making that point.
Let me let y'all know that I'm the Scarlet Witch up in this mug. And I was like, okay.
There was no reason she had to kill those folks that she was killing.
None whatsoever.
There.
Nope.
She could have tied them up. There are a million things she could have done.
A million things she could have done. That's right. And so when I'm seeing all that, then now that's, again, one part that I do agree with Muhammad about in terms of, it was about venting. It was about venting her grief. The thing, again, like I said from the beginning, that pushes me out of it is that you are continually incurring loss of life because you've had loss.
Right.
Okay, now we're into Reva territory.
Oh,
So I saw Anakin kill all my friends. I saw him kill all them kids, and that was just awful. So
you don't want to make this about Reva because I'll defend her till the end.
Scarlet Witch.
I'm gonna grow up and I'm gonna kill kids. And
that's
I'm gonna kill
post-traumatic stress. It does
I'm
things
gonna
to
do the same thing that was done to me. The very reason I hate Anakin, Vader, Skywalker, Mr. Breath and Mask, I'm gonna do that.
You're a kid and you see the greatest warrior of the Jedi killing all your friends.
It's different when I do it, though. Right. So he did that. Now I hate him. Now I'm going to get him back. And on the way to get him back, the way I'm going to get him back is I'm going to do the same thing he did. I'm going to become the very thing I'm trying to destroy. Because he's different when I do it. Because my feelings are hurt. My feelings, you don't understand.
But to be clear, I think the real problem with a lot of this is that we don't have a crowd shot for anything, right? We don't have the crowd shocked by it for the most part. When Wanda's doing these things in WandaVision, we have all these people breaking and being like, this is horrifying, this is awful.
Yeah, it's not like...
We don't have that.
It's not like in the film in Ultron where Wanda is really displayed, and the Hulk, she mind messes with the Hulk, and what do we get? We get those crowd shots. We see the Hulk, that's what snaps the Hulk out. We see the Hulk going like, oh, I am a monster. Right. And we never get any of that here.
Right. And I think part of that's COVID. I think that, ultimately speaking, you can't do crowd shots, right? There you can't get as many people on screen. If you look at the way
you could put them on a green screen and make it happen.
I'm all for it. I'm just saying I think that was part of why they did this.
I mean, literally, Chris Evans talked about in the first Avengers movie, like you were talking about a shot where like they wanted his arm in a different position. Like, all right, we'll do another take. He's like, no, we'll just CGI your arm.
Yeah,
like, they can do it. They can make it happen. He's like, oh, okay.
Well, I think the thing I have with this is, first of all, I think the point about Reva is good because I think Scarlet Witch is a Sith. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that that's exactly what she is.
Her origin is basically the same as Anakin's, more or less.
Yeah,
I mean, it's, you know, she goes to the dark side because she can't let go of what she fears to lose, and she has this attachment to her family and to her kids and to Vision. She loses all of these things, and she goes completely insane.
And she basically was complicit in Vision's death. Yeah.
She loses everything, single thing she ever loves, and that's her story, unfortunately.
And I think the other thing I will say, and I said this about another IP of Disney, but I have the same problem with this movie that I have with a lot of what Disney is putting out across all of its IP that it has bought, which is there are a lot of cool, shiny moments, and they go for cool, shiny moments all the time. Unfortunately, I think they are letting us all down with storytelling and throughput, as you guys put it, across multiple. You know, if you're going to create this whole universe, if you're going to take Star Wars, it needs to make sense across everything that's there that you're labeling as Star Wars. Same thing with the Marvel. You have taken on this huge task, but you've taken it on and told us all that it's supposed to make sense across this. Well, as in, you got to do the hard work of making sure that it makes sense. It works across all of your various shows and everything else.
Right.
And it's like
it's going way too fast for them to be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's what was great about the first 10 years of the MCU. Yeah. Kevin Feige would doctor, alter, he would send in notes, he would make sure things stayed within the context of the overall story they wanted to tell, and it feels like all that's going out the window.
Yeah, and it's like, and the disappointing thing, I mean, and not that I sit up nights and I worry about what other people are going to say about me on Twitter, but it's like, look, if I turn my brain off and just watch this movie, it's, you know, and some other things that they put out recently, I can very much enjoy it. It's very beautiful to look at and everything else. The problem is that when I start to think about it and then look back at how it ties to other stuff, and then my brain starts going, well, we got a problem now.
No, you just turn on that Michael Bay explosion lizard brain and you're good to go.
Yeah. So
the problem is, like, I find things, you know, without meaning to, and it's clear that it's taking me out of the story.
Right.
And this is where the problem is. There are just too many of those moments.
There are a ton of those moments in this movie. There's no question about it. There's a ton of moments where you're just like, this doesn't make sense. It just doesn't fit with what I know about the way that this story should be going.
Okay. It's too bad because there are definitely things that are worthwhile in here. There are things that we've all picked out that we really enjoy. Like, that's an interesting idea. I wish they had pursued that. But it's just cluttered up with all this other stuff that doesn't really matter or doesn't fit.
Okay, I'm going to give you another character that once again, that's why I'm always amazed at the Laffy Taffy nature of these arguments. Because they bend and stretch because they're not the same across the board. And I'm like, again, it's just a me thing. I'm admitting my bias.
They bend and stretch like John Krasinski. That's right.
If you throw something up, it's going to come down. That don't have nothing to do with your demographics. If you rub your hands together, you're going to feel friction. That don't have nothing to do with your demographics. If you're driving in a car, then mass increases with velocity. That don't have nothing to do with who you are. The physical laws that govern the universe are no respect of person. So that's the way I tend to think. Right. So I'm going to give you another character, and as soon as I say their name, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. And that character is Walter White. Walter White may have been dying, but Walter White was actually a Revenge of the Nerds character. He said, y'all laughing at me and you think I'm this kind of sniveling chemistry teacher, and I kind of am, but you don't understand. I got a whole nother dude inside of me. And the whole series is about us watching him shed everything good about himself and become this monster. But what makes that story so enjoyable to watch is at the end, his wife says, if you say one more time you did it for your family, he says, no, I did it for me. I did it because I liked it. I did it because I was good at it. He understands what he became. And when you don't have the antagonist having a moment like that, a moment of clarity that we as the audience can see, you get that you carved a path of destruction everywhere you went then, but nobody defends Walter White just because he didn't like being a wimpy teacher or he was dying of cancer. You don't get to string kids out on drugs just to prove you're not the wimp they think you are.
Right.
You going to jail and then you go into hell.
Right.
You don't have a problem with that with him.
That
But
whole
with
trope
Wanda,
where the villain holds the hero hostage, right? They're all chained up, and the villain goes through all their motivations, and they talk to the hero, and everyone says, "Why are you wasting your time? Just kill the hero." That's what we need, right? We need to see what the villain's motivations are by having them talk to the hero, and that's really missing from this film.
We need
I
some
mean-
monologuing. So-
For somebody,
So-
like the Joker, for
Which
instance,
is funny
like-
after last time we were talking about don't talk to the villain. Don't let the villain talk.
I mean, like for
It has
instance,
a value.
if you look at Lex Luthor, if he had the opportunity, would kill Superman right away. He might gloat for a second, but he would kill him as quick as he can because he understands how dangerous Superman is. Whereas with the Joker, somebody like that, he craves the relationship between himself and Batman. He likes this game of trying to twist Batman and make him see his point of view. That's why he never offs Batman when he has the chance. And one of my favorite lines out of The Killing Joke is when Batman tries one last time to reason with him at the very end, and Joker has a moment of clarity, and he says, no, it's too late for that. And he accepts himself as the villain.
Right. But
Lex
Lex
Luthor
Luthor still
wouldn't-
talks to Superman. He just does it after he's lost, right?
Yeah.
He's like, you
Lex
think you beat
Luthor-
me, but here's what's really going on.
Yeah.
So he'll
Luthor
still
would not
reveal.
kill Superman because he thinks Superman is dangerous. Lex will kill Superman because Lex fancies himself a god and Superman stands in his way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Well,
the
that's
thing.
that's
is
his
that-
the way of his
rationalization.
ego.
That's
I-
his rationalization. Oh, Superman's a super alien. You know, he's not a human. He shouldn't be the one protecting us.
No.
He's probably going to be evil because evil people project their ideals onto others.
Lex feels
But
the
if Lex
same way
Luthor never
Doom
spoke to
feels.
Superman, he'd be a boring villain. He speaks to
Yeah.
Superman all the time.
Well, Lex
True,
feels the same way Doom
Lex wants to
feels.
be the best man in the world, and he can't do that with Superman in the way, so he has to get
Right.
rid of Superman so he can show off how great he is.
That
I
he's the
think this all-
rightful ruler of the earth. He's the rightful ruler, and this alien standing in my way.
I think this all comes back to throughput in writing, though, and understanding what you're writing and who you're writing. I mean, Lex Luthor is a narcissistic megalomaniac.
Yeah.
Joker is a delusional schizophrenic, and Wanda, especially in this movie, is a delusional psychopath. You know, and so they should operate with that trait. You know, you need to understand who it is that you're writing, and then write them in the appropriate way. And it's like, you know, so going back to Wanda, it's like a delusional. How does a delusional psychopath act? And you know, and what is, you know, what are her faults? What are her, you know, what are her
Okay,
good traits
so-
possibly? But you know, so.
Okay, so as the movie progresses, and I'm going to mention here evidence of what I thought was huge missed potential, and I'm not the only person that thinks this. What happens is when they decide to escape through dimensions to get away from Wanda, and Wanda's got to chase him, they actually go through 5 or 6 before they end up in the one where red is go and green is stop, and one of them is the cartoon or animated dimension. And in those brief moments, we see what this movie could have been and all the different places.
That was a really cool sequence for sure.
Right.
That's what I thought the movie in general was going to be about.
But we
that
don't
were
get
going
to see what the movie could have been. They barely show anything.
But that's
Yeah,
what-
well, like,
that's what
we
I'm saying.
barely got
The
to
few
see-
moments that
they
Raimi
teased
gives
us.
us, I think, are great.
Well, they
Yeah, we
teased us
did
with
a
the
few
potential
Steve
of-
Ditko kind of moments, but I really wanted that to be the majority of the film.
That's it, Jeff. That's it. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. I thought that once they started off with that sequence and we saw them dimension hopping and we saw how many different things were there, we
Mhm.
were going to spend the majority of the film.
Come on, just
visiting-
one
I-
road, just one pathway leading into a mouth, please, just one.
I was
I would-
hoping we get something like Excalibur's cross-time caper, where you're just gradually stopping into these different dimensions, and eventually you have the larger story that connects all of them.
I
And they
will
come
say
together.
that
That's not what we
even
get.
those flashes to the different dimensions, there's nothing interesting going on there. We got the paint dimension, that's it. Everything else is just like different colors. There's not.
Why
like,
don't we get
show us the world?
uh,
Show us what the Marvel
I'm-
characters are like
I'm
in that
definitely-
world. Show us some
I'm
battles.
definitely going
Show
to
us
go
something.
back. I'm definitely going to go back and like pause and go frame by frame because I'm pretty sure somebody put Easter eggs in there.
have you seen?
But it
that-
happens so fast you don't get to register it consciously.
Yeah.
Right.
Have you
right,
seen? I think it was Ryan. I think Ryan Reynolds did it, but he released a thing, which would have been great to see as an alternate reality. That one is like, oh, or we're not going there. Where Deadpool sneaks up.
Oh
and
no,
goes-
no, not in that reality. Not where
Yeah,
Deadpool's
sneaks
at.
up and beheads Wanda when she's confronting the Illuminati. So I'm like,
Yes.
Listen, this was their chance. Show us every single one of those what if universes in a flash.
Yes.
You know, like
Yeah.
just show us
Or
that.
like
Show us
the Fox X-Men universe or something like that. The ones
yeah,
that they
like,
have.
they could be in a different
see-
portion of the universe at every point there. They don't
They
have
have
to
Patrick
necessarily
Stewart.
be at the exact
And-
same spot, just flashing through.
What a tremendous missed opportunity. You could have literally, like you said, legitimately taken snippets, pay the rights. Come on, you're Disney, you can afford it. Pay the rights to take snippets
You
of
already
all
own
those
them.
other things.
That's
From
but also,
Fox
Show us
and Sony
Vader.
and all that.
Put
I
Vader
thought we
in.
were going to see we got spoiled by No Way Home. After No
Mhm.
Way Home, we were expecting that same level.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I
That's
thought
because
one
No
of
Way
those
Home was
things-
supposed to come after this movie. Right.
Well, I thought we were
Hmm.
going to see like
Oh,
Gwen
okay.
Stacy. I thought we were going to see like anybody else has died in a Marvel movie. I thought we were going to see maybe the World War II version of Cap. I thought a whole bunch of things were going to happen once that happened, but that kind of stuff didn't happen. So we landed in this dimension, and red means go and green means stop, which is stupid. And then pizza come in balls, okay. But then they have something that was just so like who approved this? Where you stand on a square and it reads your mind and tells your deepest Really?
just for everybody to see.
right, and you just
Everybody on the
stand there.
It
And
was
you
just a
let
convenient
all-
way to get America's exposition out.
Right, America's exposition, because I
So
guess
silly.
they thought that would make
Why
us
couldn't
feel
they
more
just
about
talk about it and then have like a flashback? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, they can talk to each other. Why does
Flashback.
it have to be them just standing there? And
because they
this
had
is
to
that
show
loneliness again.
because
You're
they had to
standing
show
by
the two
yourself.
moms, and she had to emphasize that I have two moms and I lost them.
Still
and
could have done that in a flashback.
who is going to voluntarily step on that thing? By the way,
Oh,
for
I am.
everybody to hear.
I am.
Oh no!
I am all
Lord
over
have
that.
Not
mercy.
me.
Oh, Lord,
Let me show you
no.
your worst moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, my goodness, no.
I will fearlessly put my arm in the bear trap.
And
Yeah.
so I'm looking at him now like, oh, okay. I thought Strange was going to run and snatch her off there. Like, no, don't do that. But they're just standing around. I'm like, really, dude? But okay, you want us to
Yeah.
buy that?
I would flash to finding out how much my house was going to cost. Yeah.
and
Like the worst moment.
then we see more of that emphasis on Doctor Strange ultimately goes bad in every dimension, even when he's a hero, he's still a bad guy. And it brings up a very interesting question. Now, this is something, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but I'll come back really quickly. A few years ago, I was a part of a songwriting team that worked on a civil rights play that featured contemporaries of Dr. King. One of those men is named Bayard Rustin. Most people don't know that name. He actually has 2 high schools in America named after him. Long story short, a lot of the things that happened in the civil rights movement were a result of Bayard's action, but he was an ex-communist, he was gay, he was an ex-felon,
So he never became the face.
so he never became the face of the thing, so that's why a lot of people don't know who he is. So in one of the interviews for the play, my question was, how good do you have to be for history to remember you? That's my question about Doctor Strange in this movie, because it seems that, like, how do you balance your bad and your good? When do you know that the scales have tipped? So, like, you did all this good, and you did one bad thing. Will people let that go? Well, it kind of depends on the nature of the bad thing. Because if you did something that's just egregious, even if it's just one time, people are going to be like, that kind of thing. So all throughout the movie, I'm like, are you saying that Strange is bad? Or are you saying that you couldn't control him? Or are you saying that he wouldn't do what you wanted him to do? Because that's not all the same thing. So we find out he's got the statue and he died saving Thanos, blah, blah, blah. And then Mordo is there. And then they see Mordo, then they square off. And then they do that thing that Han and Lando do in Empire, where it looks like right. Then it's, oh, buddy, how you doing? And I'm like, my spider sense was tingling. I'm like, you're right. And then, no, this is a Han and Lando thing. He done betrayed you. You just don't know it yet. So then we find out, and I know I'm skipping some stuff, but then we find out about, what's really going on.
Right.
And then at some point we get to the point about, but that's later when they meet the Illuminati about the biggest threat to the universe is you or whatever. But we'll get there in a minute. So as all that is happening, what I'm saying to myself is, if you're Strange, how should you respond? Because what I wanted to know was, what was the long-term plan against Wanda? If you believed she could somehow dimension hop, or you believe with the dark hole, because while this is going on, Wanda's also going to find basically her temple. she basically found a prophetic temple and looked at the writing and said, well, this must mean I'm supposed to rule the world. And so then she learns how to dream walk.
Right.
And so now, instead of having to go to the other dimensions, I can just take over the body of another version of myself in that dimension, living or dead,
Right.
by the way. And so that kind of thing. So what I wanted to know in those moments, before we get to the Illuminati thing, what I wanted to know is, if I'm strange, what is the long-term solution? Because you can't keep running forever.
Right.
You can
I just
commit
think that at
conflict.
that point, he just, beggars can't be choosers. He's just been defeated so bad by one of his friends. I mean, he's just been taken down in such a shocking way that he's just grasping at straws. He'll take anything that is potentially going to be help in his, his scramble to try to figure out what to do next. He's just completely in shock about what happened. He's completely stunned. He'll go to his greatest enemy and try to trust them, because who else does he have, and what else does he have at this point? So to me, he's just regrouping, right? He's got this big wallop, and he's just regrouping and trying to figure out where to go next. And unfortunately for him, he just gets walloped again, right? The regrouping doesn't really work out for him at all in any way.
What would have been more satisfying
I
is
don't
if they...
disagree. Actually, I quite agree. Here's my thing with the way Strange is depicted. Because I keep calling him the Sorcerer Supreme. I know he's not, but what I mean is he once was. I find his lack of big picture thinking sometimes
Right.
kind of odd.
Right.
Which he showed in Infinity War.
Yeah, right. If you're
when he had a stone.
you're in charge of basically keeping the dimensional barriers intact or warding off threats from other dimensions, or you've got the power and the awareness of not only time but also space.
Right.
It seems like many times his thinking was rather small. I agree with what you said, man on the run.
Right.
But you should be thinking at a different level, because.
But what is life like when you've had an Infinity Stone for so many years and then you don't, right? How does that change the way that you react to things? I still think ultimately his major problem is he's just looking at things just from his perspective, right? He can't actually look at things from anybody else's perspective from his own. And that's why it's all just sort of in the moment. He's not thinking broadly. You're completely right. He's not thinking from other perspectives.
I think that's terribly flawed, because if he's going dimension to dimension, and he's already been in a situation, because chronologically now we've had No Way Home come out first, and honestly the way they set it up makes sense that this happens first, the way they've ended up making the film. So he's seen how teamwork works. He's been on a team before. He and the Illuminati should have worked together. He shouldn't have been. Everything that happens in this movie is a hindrance to him. Everybody he meets, everything, it's all a hindrance. He and the Illuminati should have teamed up and is like, okay, yeah, we're aware of Wanda. We had a similar situation. We band together, because that's the whole point of the Avengers, is they are a team who deal with threats that no single Avenger could deal with. And that would have been much more satifying and much more heroic, and honestly much more believable in my estimation.
But they're in the same place that Strange is in. They can't do it. They can't.
Well, didn't the Illuminati act very condescendingly arrogant the whole time they were on screen?
Oh, hugely. Like when Captain Marvel's like,
oh,
we can take care of Wanda.
Real quick before we get there,
a whole section to them. We're about to get there.
If you're interested, I found that clip, and evidently this is a clip that Sam Raimi filmed. It's going to be on the Blu-ray when it's released, if you want to see it. So
okay, we'll get there in a minute. Let's see it in a minute. Okay, there's one more thing I want to discuss, and then we're going to do the deep dive into the Illuminati section. The other thing I want to discuss is Strange's relationship with Christine, both in the regular universe and this other universe that he finds her in. Now, I got so many arguments on Twitter about this, but what else is Twitter for? But I didn't. After I saw the What If series, the Doctor Strange episode was one of the few that I really liked and watched several times, because I thought it was quite intense. But what they make clear in that episode is that his love for Christine was not only deep and definitely borderline obsessive, but that it was mutual. And that's the part that threw me about her in this film, because every scene with her in this film, regardless of the universe that we're in, she was like, well, our relationship didn't have definition, and well, we never really got it together, and then she makes that ridiculous statement that you always had to be holding the scalpel. I could respect you for it, but I could never love you for it.
I mean, have you met surgeons? Yeah.
Yeah,
But
precisely.
after watching the What If episode, I was like, wait a minute. Every scenario that we saw with you guys, that love was mutual. She couldn't wait to spend the rest of her life with you. She was enjoying everything, and you had to keep facing the fact there was an unchangeable point in time. So you kept absorbing more things to try to get enough power to change it. But the whole idea was that he literally turned the universe inside out. Literally. Like if you took your T-shirt and turned it inside out, Strange literally did that just for Christine.
But that's, I mean, ultimately speaking, you're completely right. I think the problem here is that, again, he's not able to reciprocate that love in this time, in this universe, in his current condition. And I don't know what it truly does to somebody to allow, so many people to die out of your own game plan. If you take half the entire universe world and you allow them to die because they need to
you don't allow them to die. They were all going to die. Over 14 million possible futures. They all died. There was only one way to bring them
what
back.
does it do to somebody to live through that experience?
Oh, yeah, it's terrible.
And so ultimately speaking, he's not reciprocating that love towards her.
But I'm not talking about him loving her. I'm talking about her loving him.
But she says basically that she does love him, but she just knows that he's not in a place where he can.
Yeah, but she also said we were never going to work. It was never going to last
because he can't give back.
It's probably her rationalizing it.
Indeed. But at the same time, I kept thinking, well, here's the obvious thing. And this, once again, goes to the core of Hero. When he lamely tries to explain what was going on, it's like, I've got to guard this universe. It's so much bigger than you and me. That's part of the sacrifice. There was this great TV series. I think it was Time and Again, Almost Human, something like that, about this. It starts off with John Goodman. He gets hit by a train, and his brain is put into this genetically superhuman body. And in one of his adventures, he's not allowed to talk to his wife and his child. Like, that old life is dead as far as the government's concerned, or we'll just put somebody else's brain in his body. And so he runs across this kid who's like Down syndrome, special needs, whatever, well, semi-adult. And he actually helps him kind of get a bit over that hump. And he's like, he considers him like Superman. It's like, yeah, but Superman doesn't get Lois Lane. He says, yeah. And the kid goes like, yeah, but he gets to be Superman. And that's kind of the point of being the hero. You take one for the team. That's just the way it rolls.
Okay. But again, like I said, the disconnect that did we all disappear? Okay. The disconnect that I had was that after watching the What If, in every scenario, the love was reciprocated. She was right there with him. And here, it almost seemed like there was a level of casualness that we hadn't seen before. And so he was sold out for her. And even though he understood all that, but she was just like, well, no, it only went so far. Like,
where was she in the 5 years? Where was she in the 5 years versus him? Because he was gone in those 5 years, right? Yeah. But she was still around in those 5 years. What does that do to their relationship as well?
Well, obviously she got married because he wasn't around for 5 years.
Well, I'm just saying.
He kept saying, you're the great love of my life. And she kept saying, but you are not the great love of mine. So all I'm saying is that coming off of What If, that confused me. That's all I meant.
Yeah. By the end of the movie, obviously that relationship is in a different place, right? I mean, ultimately speaking, the reason that there's a reciprocal love there is that he learns to trust her to help him, right? He learns to trust her to take care of him. And he's never allowed her to take care of him before. That's never been part of their relationship. And so what she's ultimately saying is, I'm willing to be there for you. You won't let me be there for you. But at the end of the movie, she's fighting these ghouls for him, right? He's like, listen, you got to guard my body. My body's going to be compromised. I can't protect myself. You got to protect me. You got to help me out. And that act of allowing her to take care of him is what she's been looking for this whole time, right? She wants to be able to show her love and show her dedication towards him. And he would never allow her to do that because he was too prideful. He was too sort of in his own space. So I think that's what it's trying to say. I don't know if it gets there.
But it fails because it felt very much like the scene in Conan the Barbarian where they have to protect his body from the deathly spirits. But at the same time, he's like, all right, you need to protect my body from these damn spirits. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. You're just a little squishy mortal. By the way, hey, there's a cool weapon you could use over there. You're going to have to figure that one out on your own.
Yeah, but he's like, you're going to be able to handle this. He gives her some credit.
Yeah, but she doesn't know flipping anything about the magic.
That's absolutely, that's totally fair.
That
That's
kills
totally
me.
fair. But he does the same thing to America. We'll get to
He
that.
should be like, here's the wand of Batum, you know?
Right. She grows super magic control and super magic powers in the moment. And since you brought that up, because we need to get to the Illuminati.
It's the flames of Faltine. Use it.
We need to get to the Illuminati. But since you brought that up, and Steve said most of the stuff he liked was Raimi, but since you brought that up, I'm going to tell you my most hated scene in this entire film. You know what it was? That stupid music fight.
Oh, I love that.
I actually like that.
It was fun.
I could not.
Me and Muhammad, we're on the same page. I like the music fight.
In a while, the musical notes are going to come alive and grab. That was so dumb. I need a new word for dumb. I couldn't believe.
You had them become paint in a scene. All right, if they can do that, then they can fight with music. That was amazing.
I will tell you precisely. I will tell you precisely why I like that scene. In the first Doctor Strange, it's very clear. It's like we gather energy and we alter reality. So this is what I love about magic. He takes things from the environment. We see it all the time. He's taking masonry. He's drawing things from other dimensions, whether it's this environment or an environment outside of our own. So I thought, this is really cool. I like seeing all these different applications of magic, and this was a form I'd never seen before, and that delighted the crap out of me. I love that.
If he can use mirrors,
he's manipulating sound energy. That's all it is.
Music notes.
Yeah.
I hated it. I'm glad
just represented his notes. I thought it was great.
That was an amazing scene.
I'm happy.
It was visually very well done. I thought it was fun.
I hate it. I'm glad y'all liked it. I hate
the musician. The musician in DT cannot stand it.
I also like the Illuminati scene, but we'll get to that.
Yeah,
it was. But again, that's just me. I'm glad y'all liked it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I couldn't stand it. I was like, really. But anyway, okay. Now we need to go to the Illuminati because we got a lot to say about that. So, Nims, you want to run the clip? You said you wanted to run?
Yeah, let's see this.
Sure, if you want to see it. Then here we go. Hold up.
I'm the smartest man alive.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, that's not good.
Want to stop. You possessed an innocent woman, but you can still do the right thing.
There's no way this is real.
I'm about to do something terrible.
Please. I have children of my own. I understand your pain.
Is their mother still alive?
No.
Yes.
Good. There will be someone left to raise them.
This doesn't look right.
Yay!
That's amazing.
I'm sorry, what?
It would have shown two things. That Reed Richards was smart.
Right.
So let's jump into that whole scene. So
that's brilliant.
How it should have ended.
I even
for those of you that
love that Deadpool comes in on the Doctor Doom time.
Oh no!
Platform, yeah.
So first of all,
but he was referring to the Doctor Doom time platform, which was used by the Fantastic Four a number of times.
Right. That was cool. That was a cool Easter egg. And for those that don't know who the Illuminati are from the comics, wasn't Captain Marvel, wasn't Captain Carter, but it was Tony Stark, Stephen Strange, Professor X, Namor. Who else was Black Panther? And was T'Challa in there?
Black Bolt,
yes,
definitely. Black Bolt was there. Yeah,
Black Bolt and Reed Richards. That's right. And so wasn't quite a direct translation, but what was clear to us is that they were the Avengers. They were the top heroes. They were the guardians of what was right. And it was a big deal for Strange to be brought before them, and they already had made up their minds about him. And so the most telling foreshadowing line was, of course, Captain Marvel goes, "We're not worried about Wanda. We got her. We got that. We worry about you." And I'm saying to myself, that line is designed to come back and bite you in the behind later. So it was like this big deal. And then when we see Professor X come out and then the music plays from the 90s animated show when he's in the yellow thing, I was like, wow. So on the one hand, they kind of bent over backwards to give us the nostalgia that we craved in live action. So that part I thought was cool. Didn't quite understand why it was Monica's mom as Captain Marvel, because I would rather have seen Marvel. But anyway, that's another conversation.
Yeah, apparently my iPad ran out of battery. I forgot to turn the screen down. Yeah.
So we come to the scene, and so what was communicated clearly, even by the fact that they basically had thrones that sat above whoever was standing beneath, was that this was a place of awe, and this was a place of reverence, and this was a place of where the big decisions are made. And so visually, the setup I thought was incredible.
They sit in judgment above you.
And of course, finally seeing Krasinski as Reed Richards, although we got a tweet today where Feige said that was another universe, so we thought we'd try it out. So maybe they're not going to do that when they actually display.
I hope they do. I thought he was good as Reed.
He was great as Reed. I hope this is not.
He is way too old for them to use. He's way too old for them to use as a restart. There's no way they're going to do that. There's no way he's going to dedicate himself to 9 films right now, right?
I thought Black Bolt was pretty good too, though. So
yeah.
Well, that was
isn't that the same guy who was from the TV series?
Yeah, that's Black Bolt from the Inhumans TV series.
Yeah, okay, I thought so.
Comic accurate costume on. So there's this big setup, and they make it clear once again that they think that Strange is the problem, not Wanda. Which I was like, oh, okay. And so basically, things play out, and things are talking, and Strange still needs to make penance, and blah 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 blah.
It's isolation and a lack of trust. It's the same thing that Strange is doing. It's the same thing that's being sort of a thoroughfare throughout this. It's an isolation and a lack of trust. They have the same problem he does. They can't trust him.
See,
no heroes. They have a telepath.
No heroes. Everybody makes the same mistakes.
I mean, in the end, their telepath is the one that trusts him, right? Because he's sort of like, well, okay, you go fight.
I peeked in his head.
So Wanda learns how to dream walk, and so she dream walks into the Wanda of that dimension, takes over her body, and storms into the castle, the palace, the throne room, whatever. And the thing that everybody talked about from then until now is how she, in some cases, quite literally, made mincemeat out of the Illuminati, and that is quite literal. With how she destroyed Reed Richards, she turned him basically into silly putty and like Big League Chew, like a long string of bubble gum. She turned him into that. She turned him into that right away. Reed says, Black Bolt can destroy you with one word from his mouth. So the smartest man in the universe gives you the key to defeating the most powerful member of the Illuminati.
And then Black Bolt tries to talk with his mouth sealed shut. Why the hell would you try to talk then? He keeps quiet all day long, but he has to talk then?
Right. So his mouth gets sealed like Neo from The Matrix with Agent Smith, and he blows a hole in his own brains. I'm like, what a way to die. So, okay. So then, of course, the females are the ones left to fight, and they fight the longest, and they put up the longest fight because, of course, they do. But, Captain Carter, in her usual Steve Rogers stealing way, says, I could do this all day. And then 2 seconds later, she's cut in half. Okay. She's
cut in half in the exact same way that Green Goblin is, right? Right down. It's exactly the same shot. Right. That's great.
And then Captain Marvel, air quotes, gets crushed underneath falling debris, which would not have killed any version of Captain Marvel. That shouldn't have even killed Rick Jones, but that's another conversation.
Right.
So Wanda basically cuts through them like they're nothing. And I'm saying to myself that, first of all, if you're going to introduce like Reed Richards and have all these cameos, and then the Professor X thing. Now, if you saw any of the additional scenes and stuff with Raimi, there's a couple of scenes in there where Wanda's face is actually possessed and her eyes are red and her teeth are pointed. And so it's a more clear version of what Muhammad was talking about. It's actually a visual of the Darkhold having fully consumed her, and she's become this ugly thing that's doing all this destruction. But in the theatrical cut, it happens so fast you have to freeze frame to see it. And so then, and also the Professor X scene is quite telling. The Professor X scene is the scene that's telling the audience that this is not really Wanda. Wanda is somewhere in a cage in her own psyche, being locked up by whatever the Darkhold version of Wanda is, or whoever.
No, you're incorrect.
Okay, tell me how I'm wrong.
That's the Wanda from that universe. That's the soul of the body that she has possessed.
Okay, right. Okay. So the Dreamwalk Wanda is the one that's in jail, and so that still makes evil Wanda evil. So Professor X goes to rescue her, and somehow Wanda sneaks up behind him and snaps his neck in the dream world, and that kills him in the real world, very Matrix style kind of death. And so everybody dies except Mortal, I believe. But so as we go through this whole thing, I'm like, I was stunned at how easily she takes out all these characters, especially if you know anything about the Kree, if you know anything about any version of Captain Marvel, if you know anything about that power level, if you know anything about Professor X, when he faced off against Phoenix, he fought Jean on the astral plane and put her in jail so quickly. She didn't know what was happening. Jean laughed and she's like, you can't take me down. And we saw how powerful Professor X really is.
Right.
And so having that comic background, inspecting that and seeing this kind of stuff happen, that's another moment that even though I love the cameos, kind of took me out of it with the ease of their defeat. So
I mean, I will agree. They shouldn't have had Captain Marvel there. They should have had Rhodes there, right? Like Jim Rhodey, they could have had him there. He could have been Iron Man. They needed an Iron Man equivalent. And ultimately speaking, it was a mistake because it makes absolutely no sense how fast Captain Marvel gets taken down. That just doesn't seem right.
Well,
not after what we saw her do in Endgame.
She unzips, Reed Richards, then does what she does to Black Bolt, and then you're telling me that Captain Carter is alive for more than like a millisecond? I mean, come on,
Well, he's massively powerful. He's not a joke. Even without his mouth, he's still very powerful.
Well, here's my issues with it. Like Steve says, Black Bolt is not a wimp. He is superhumanly powerful, even without being able to scream. And on top of that, why does the scream reflect back into his brain? Wouldn't it just blow his face open so he could still use it? It's just his lips are gone. Thin piece of membrane. Even if you're superhumanly durable, he knocks down mountains with his scream. So, I'm pretty sure he can punch through his own lips. And on top of that, Reed Richards, the so-called introduced as the smartest man in the world, approaches this megalithic titan of magic with his stretchy powers. Where's his technology? Where's the cool binder?
Where was the backup plan?
Where are the cool binders that can dampen magic? Where is all the stuff? Reed Richards relies on his stretching powers the least of anything he can do. And as far as he's concerned, his superpower is his mind. He should have had 84 different contingencies ready to go. He should have Batman the crap out of that whole thing. No, I'm going to punch you and get spaghettified. Dumb.
And just to be clear, when I say the second half of the movie better, after this part is the second half. But ultimately speaking, these were put in as rote cameos, and they just didn't even try. They didn't try to use the characters. They didn't try to have any sort of character building. They didn't try to make them interesting. Having Reed Richards in this situation and having John Krasinski here and having him waste that cameo on this situation, it was just a crime. It was
it's another worst. It's another example of the Worf effect. We're going to show you just how bad, we haven't gotten through showing you just how tough Wanda is. So we're going to Worf effect this world's versions of the Avengers, basically. And she's just going to mop the floor with them.
Yeah, and they could have done it. They just put some lesser heroes there. Put some lesser.
Should have been there anyway. It should have been some version of Tony Stark. That's another thing that
they are punching bags to make Wanda look tough. That is it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately speaking, she's Scarlet Witch with Darkhold. She's pretty powerful. I think ultimately she could take down almost any of them, but the fights just weren't realistic in terms of how quickly
it should have been done in a convincing way, though.
She did do some cool things that she would do in the comics. It is something she has done when she is evil Wanda. It's something she's done when she's been possessed by Cthulhu before, where she does that and she just kind of strings you up in the air. And you're just stuck there.
You can't say that she can't beat Professor X if she got rid of all the mutant powers out of almost the entire universe, right? I mean, if she had that power, then she could certainly take down Professor X. It just didn't feel.
Honestly,
good.
Ever since they made her a reality warper, they kind of ruined the character. So that's what happened there. But it's just
Professor X should put up more of a fight on the astral plane because he went up against Phoenix. Number one, but number two. The other thing about all that, and we talked about Captain Carter lasting longer, which was ridiculous, and it should have been some version of Tony Stark. But also, during that whole thing, I'm saying, because the aftermath of that is that the Wanda whose body she took over murdered that dimension's heroes.
Mm-hmm.
So if she leaves, then that Wanda is still on the hook because it was done in her body. And so what's the aftermath of that? How is that going to be dealt with or explained?
Well, she doesn't care. I mean, like Strange asked her flat out, "It's like, hey, what happens when you go to this dimension? What happens to the mother of those children?" I don't know. We'll find something for her to do, I guess. So she was planning on murking her alternate self from the get-go just to have the children.
Yeah.
So no compunctions, no sympathy, no mercy.
Right.
In addition, that it wasn't even necessary because they, as has been pointed out by many people, she could just have found a universe where the kids were orphaned and then just adopt them.
Yeah, the least evil action she was planning on that version of Wanda was possessing her, when usually that gets you a visit from a young priest and an old priest. So it's like,
and let's face it, we've already addressed this once before. Her whole deal for stealing the power of America Chavez is like, what if the kids get sick? What if this happens? Like, you made the kids.
Right.
You can bend time, space, and reality. The kids never have to get sick. And let me just bring this up real quick. Here's my theory on the children. I believe that when Wanda created the children out of her grief in WandaVision, that's when they came into existence across the multiverse. Because as Strange keeps telling her again and again and again, Wanda, you have no children. I don't think Wanda ever had children anywhere until that Wanda made the children. And
I just
and
thought
the other,
that maybe she saw them in her dream and they existed in other multiverse.
they exist in, because she's dreaming about it, because she wants it. And I have one more problem with it. At least if I believe that those other children were born of her and had grown to like the ages of 8 and 10 with her, that she would be that fierce mother. But no, this woman had those children for about 4 days. 4 days. I'm sorry, you cannot put all this stuff off the fierceness of a mother when, like, I had like a 30-second birth and they magically grew over the span of 4 days from like, from infants to like 8 and 10. Like, no, I am not buying this level of grief.
At least pick a dimension where Vision's there too, right? I mean,
precisely. Why didn't she bring Vision back?
All about it.
Okay, now that's the other thing I talked about that earlier. The reason,
I mean, she brought him back before. Why not bring him back again?
The reason they didn't have Pietro and Vision in this movie, because both of those males would have been a voice of reason against her chaos, and they couldn't have that, because Pietro, if you look at how they acted in Age of Ultron before he died, was always helping her chill, always giving some kind of balance, always giving some kind of perspective, bigger picture thing, even though he was angry like she was.
And even her fake Pietro in WandaVision.
And Vision would have absolutely not been on board. Vision would have given his life again.
So she doesn't bring them back because she doesn't want that counterbalance.
I just
think
think
all the movie succeeds in doing, whether intended to or not, is showing us how evil and selfish Wanda is.
I think she's as mentally ill as
Moon Knight.
Moon Knight is. I think she's she's a delusional psychopath and with some schizophrenic tendencies. And honestly, it's like everything she does is in furtherance of to bring her delusions to life after a certain point, and I think she had some sort of psychotic split. Well, and I think it was even worse after Pietro died. And I think if you go back, you could see that. I don't know if they were meaning to tell that story, but I think it's there, and it's like, and the problem is she has the power to bring those delusions to life. My delusions are about winning the World Cup.
Well, it's so much, it's so much worse because, they're twins.
Yeah.
As far as siblings go, you'll never get closer than that because they're obviously, they're not fraternal twins where they're identical. But they're still twins. They've still known each other their entire lives. They've shared things that regular siblings won't, just because they've always been there every moment. So yeah, I can totally see that argument.
It's just, once again, it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, though. It's such a weird choice to make because it's kind of playing off the Ultimates universe, but not. But they've made Pietro the better person, the more heroic person, when really most versions of Pietro, Pietro is the guy who wants to be like Dad and the bad version of Dad, So,
but also
he has Pietro Maximoff syndrome.
Yeah. I also want you to notice that her mind manipulation power, just like in Age of Ultron, is convenient or tied into the plot or whatever, because there's so many other situations without a loss of life She could have mind manipulated like she did in Age
Mhm.
of Ultron. But that's really the first and last time, she manipulates Stark, she manipulates the Hulk, and then we see her when she turns to the quote unquote good side, kind of manipulate the townspeople to help them clear off of the island or whatever. But I'm saying that there were many cases in this movie where a little bit of mind control could have gone a long way to saving lives if she had any kind of an inclination to minimize loss of life to still get what she wanted.
Well, we know she could bend 3,000 people to her will.
I always thought that the thing that would have been, one possible way to have done this that would have been interesting and kept Wanda as a villain, is what is she really searching for? She's searching for family because she lost family back in Sokovia and everything, and now she's lost Pietro and she's searching for belonging. She wanted that with Vision, and she sees all this reality. She sees she can't have her children. And in a 180 from No More Mutants, she says, give me mutants or something. And suddenly her family is there and we get House of M. We get Magneto, and she unleashes the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and everything that mutant kind has to do with strife in the Marvel universe on the world.
Yeah, she could have been. She could have been the impetus.
Going to happen.
Impetus
that's what I
for
thought was going to be the biggest twist of the movie. That we're going to get to the end of the movie, instead of saying her famous line, "No more mutants," she was going to say, "Make some mutants, make more mutants."
Yeah, give me mutants
or whatever, and then everything Nim said would happen.
Let there be mutants.
Magneto would be her dad. Lorna would show up.
And then Kamala Khan wouldn't have to be a djinn. Yeah.
Right. Speed and Wiccan were going to show up. Luna would show up. All the X-Men would show up, and that was going to be the key to bringing them into the universe. And then the universe is now going to have to deal with Marvel's version of X-Men. I thought that was going to be the perfect setup for that to happen. And I'm like, that would be the ultimate twist. And even if we saw it coming, we would have greatly enjoyed that if that's what was going to happen. But no,
I just think they had plans to do those kind of things, and because of the pandemic, they got spooked. Like, I think they just said, listen, we don't know with the next 2 years of movies what impact they're going to have. We can't have them push into the next era. We got to, hold ourselves still. And now that things are done, we're going to start seeing things in Thor. We're going to start seeing things in the movies that are coming after that.
Because I was thinking,
push forward.
Because I was thinking, final scenes. I mean, talk about a final scene for a movie. She says that and everybody's going crazy, but we don't see anything. Right. And then you see her standing on Mount Wundergar, and then you hear the footsteps, and here comes Magneto standing right next to her in the center, and then Pietro on the other side of her, and then Lorna.
Oh, how cool that would have been.
And it's just like, and then fade to black, and it's like, oh my God!
Maybe even throw like in a little glimpse of the High Evolutionary in the background.
Every final scene in the pandemic had absolutely no consequence, right? It doesn't lead to anything that we couldn't get somewhere else, and we couldn't get in some way else. It just doesn't. We got a movie trailer in one of them. I mean, there's just no consequence to the post credits in these kinds of in this era. They just decided it wasn't worth it, and if they were going to do a post credits that mattered, they'll put it on the TV show so that everybody's watching it.
I think what you're saying really holds true, because my son has said the same thing and has lost a lot of interest in, because he says it feels like they're going nowhere, like they're just treading water.
Well, I also thought we were going to get some cameos by the cast of The Gifted, and I was also hoping we were going to get some cameos by the cast of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
It would have been so easy.
Yeah,
so easy.
Opportunity.
Give me Cloak and Dagger. That Cloak and Dagger show.
I would have liked to have seen Wanda and Lorna meet face to face.
Right.
And Wanda's like, "Who are you?" And Lorna's like, "I'm your sister." And Wanda's like, "What?" And then we can explore that in another film. But I think what Muhammad's saying is right. But I mean, potential wasted opportunity. That's
one of my rules in Twitter, back when I was really, really active, was never save anything, right? If you've got a good picture, if you got a good meme, if you got a good something, don't save it for next week. Don't say, oh, we can use it later. You just put it out there. They've got to do that. If they've got ammo, they've got interesting things that they're planning on doing, they have to stop holding back. They're at that point in their momentum where they got to pick up. They shouldn't be holding back right now. And they think that they're still playing for, the phase 1 era where they can hold things back long enough. People will wait for it. We're past that point now. People are expecting that we're going to start having some momentum towards something big. They're talking about Secret Wars. They want something big to happen. And they weren't willing to push and really give us a lot. They just wanted to give us little nuggets.
Especially concerned with people having superhero fatigue, you should step on the gas pedal.
Yeah. Plus,
Yeah.
there's
Only
only
the best athletes can do what you just said.
Mhm.
Only Tom Brady's can do that. Look at the whole field and know where everybody is at once. Only
Right.
Michael Jordan's can look at the whole court and know where everybody is at once. Most people, when they're in the midst of their peak or when they're in their bell curve,
Right.
don't know where they are. They can't tell where they are. But that is exponentially true for any type of movie franchise or any type like Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise just proved he was the GOAT because he made a sequel to a movie that's 30, 40 years old that nobody was asking for, and it made $1 billion. Everybody loves it. And it's the first time he broke $1 billion because he understood the climate. He understood what I need to give people is an old-fashioned throwback to what movies were like before identity politics. And people are eating it up. See, only the greatest people have that level of self-awareness, what you're talking about.
Right.
Most people can't do that. But anyway.
I mean, you ask people right now who the biggest star is in the Marvel universe. What are they going to say? Right?
Elizabeth Olsen.
Right. I mean, Elizabeth Olsen, but I mean, Elizabeth Olsen's theoretically at the end of her tenure too. Like, there's only so long you can take that character, and they're at this point where they've got to build up something big and give us something with bang, or else they're going to end up with people trying to figure out who they even care about.
And someday there won't be any more Ezra Millers to sabotage the DC universe. And maybe
shots fired. Shots fired.
I mean, they've proven themselves every time, right? Trust in Feige, I always say. So, you know, he'll pull out X-Men, he'll pull out Fantastic Four, and these things could be huge. You know, they could have the biggest stars and the biggest things, but you don't know that. So put everything out there, you know, really do put Coulson back in there, figure out how to inject some excitement back into the films so that people are talking about them in a positive way. It's really, they were really treading water with this one for sure.
All right. Now I want to hear you guys' thoughts about this. What did you think about Strange being able to dream walk and reanimating his corpse?
That was the best. That was the best.
That was pure Raimi right there.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Jeff? What'd you say?
That was pure Raimi right there. That was Raimi at his Raimiest.
The second that happened, this movie,
I will say, like, Raimi seems to be. It's really interesting that on this film, Raimi seems to be channeling Evil Dead to a certain extent because we're dealing with two movies that are dependent on an evil book and like the dead rising from the grave
and Drag Me to Hell.
It really worked.
Yeah, I was
expecting he embraced that fully. The film just got so much better. I mean, the last hour of this movie is so much fun. It's just so much fun seeing how
if we're gonna show a potential downfall of Doctor Strange, or there's going to be an issue. We really should have had a lot more of that. I mean, in the trailer set me up when they're doing things like, oh, you know, the greatest villain isn't, you know, Wanda or whatever else. The greatest villain is you. And then we get that really spooky clip, and he looked a lot different in the final film because the trailer I recall, it seemed like his eyes were darker, his skin was ashen. And I was like, oh, this multiverse Doctor Strange looks pretty horrible. Like, so let's see what happens when Doctor Strange cuts loose. And now he and Wanda have to team up to deal with Unleash Doctor Strange. That was the movie I was expecting. And it's too bad that we didn't get that, because then Doctor Strange could have seen it figuratively with Wanda and factually in his own presence. And how cool would that Doctor Strange have looked with his cloak of specters? And like, as soon as that happens, I'm like, man, it's like all of a sudden if Two-Face got the powers of Spawn, because that's how cool it looked with the half the face gone and the spectral cloak. I was all about it.
Yeah, you're watching this and you're like, this is a great Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah,
this is magic. This
Raimi
is
fully embraced
craziness.
the horror part.
It's great.
Yeah.
See, and I agree with you as far as it being cool looking. I thought it was pure Army of Darkness. It looked like something right out of the Deadites would be like, I'll swallow your soul, you know, type thing, you know, this whole thing. I mean, that's exactly what I was expecting. But I hate to rain on the parade, but this ties right into the end where we get the little reveal, and it validates all of the Illuminati's worries and fears about Strange in the first place. He has corrupted himself and opened himself up to the power of the Darkhold, and now he is going right down the path of the Strange that he killed in the music battle that DT hates.
Hate it.
And so now this version of the MCU has a version of Doctor Strange who's going down the dark path again.
I
Like
don't
it's-
think that's what they're going for. I think that he embraced a darkness, and that's absolutely accurate. But I think ultimately speaking, he's still the same person. Like he hasn't
There was-
changed who he is as a person.
There was a really great Doctor Strange storyline. I forget what the arc was called, but basically, he was going to deal with Shumagorath, not like Diet Shumagorath that we got here, Gargle snot.
Gargantos.
Yeah,
Gargle snot. No, you didn't say
Yeah.
gargle
yeah, I
snot.
did. Shumagorath is a Lovecraftian nightmare. He is an apocalypse in and of himself. He is a end of everything you know and love sort of scenario. And in the comic story, he had to deal with that. Like Shumagorath was finally going to be able to break into our dimension, and he had to go to the Black Sorcerer Clue to learn how to practice black magic. He had to fight magical fire with magical fire, and it corrupted him. And even Shumagorath pointed it out. Like he tore open his vestments, and you could see his flesh was becoming corrupted and scaly and nasty looking. It's like, when you fight dragons, Strange, beware that you don't become a dragon.
Yeah,
And
but
that was
this
such a
didn't corrupt
doggone
him.
good storyline, and it could have
This
been
didn't corrupt
handled
him because he's able to trust Clea at the end of the film. I mean, he's in a place where he can find somebody else, give them power. When he gives America power, he can find a way to trust America to take care of things. He can find a way to trust Christine to take care of things. And then Clea shows up, and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna go with you." I mean, he
Don't
has
you
now
see that as
got-
a flaw, though? He instantly trusts a stranger nobody's ever seen. When just a little while ago he trusted one of his former best friends who betrayed him too sweet. Like,
Listen,
but
we might
perfect
see it as a
stranger?
flaw. This film does not see that as a
Well,
flaw.
No,
not
the
only
film
that,
doesn't see
though,
the flaw because there are no heroes in Phase 4 of the MCU.
I will say this though, is we were only looking at the first step that Path is taken on this path. And if this was just a means to get some power, then I don't think, and I'm reading stuff into the movie here, and I will admit that. But
Mhm.
you look at how that third eye manifested, that was painful, and that was, with the way, especially the way Raimi does things, that's like the way the eye manifested in Ash in the Evil Dead Part 2.
Well, it's
Yeah,
so
but it's
weird
also
because-
reflective of the Eye of Agamotto.
Exactly, but I miss the eye actually flying out of the amulet and sticking itself on his forehead. So as soon as it happens, like, oh, it's the Eye of Agamotto, but he's doing it in like a Cronenbergian body horror sort of way.
But the way it was
And again, this movie is all about perspective and getting new perspective, right? So what the eye represents is that he has a new way of looking at
Right.
things, a new perspective, and so
No,
it's
I
a
get
good
that.
thing in terms of what this film is trying to do.
I guess I'm looking at it in a very
good thing from an evil source.
I'm looking at it in a
That's Raimi, right? That's how he works.
I'm looking at it in a very Yoda way, where it says, once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. So
Yeah,
I mean,
you don't play around with the Evil Dead if you're Yoda. That's
yeah. So it's like I just see it as even the Doctor Strange that lost in the battle of the musical notes, in Fantasia Part 4. Even in that sense, I firmly believe that Doctor Strange at some point took those steps to do good, just like the Doctor Strange that the Illuminati killed, and then was just corrupted. So I'm like, I think he's taken that first step, and who knows what the future will be. Maybe they'll just ignore it, and that's absolutely possible.
No, I think this movie is saying you can come out of a horror movie.
Well,
and you can be a
another
better
problem
person.
they have with this is like they show him painfully growing the new eye.
Yeah.
And then we get to our end credit scene. It's like, oh yeah, the eye's no problem. I'm down with the eyes. Like, whoa, that was pretty jarring.
I'm saying it's not a problem in this movie. That's not a problem. It's a good thing.
Before we get there, there's a moment that America basically has her Dorothy Gale, the power was in you all along, click your heels 3 times moments. And then all of a sudden she's able to punch Wanda. And she gets a couple of good shots.
Right.
Here is where my DC fandom saved me a little bit, because I know a lot about DC. I know enough about Marvel to be dangerous, about only about X-Men and Spider-Man, and that's about it. So it's like I don't know a whole lot about America Chavez, so I wasn't even aware what her power levels or anything else are. I just knew the name. So
Well,
Well,
in the
She's
I
MCU,
ridiculously
this is
powerful in
clearly,
comics.
yeah.
I thought that was kind of ridiculous to believe.
Well, I
in
mean, the
yourself.
original idea was that America was going to be the one that helped Peter Parker in the multiple dimensions and brought in all the other Peter Parkers. So she was supposed to be a pretty powerful being in general, I think.
That would have made a lot more sense because it would have been another teenager hanging out with other teenagers
Right.
because they aged her down. Now in the comics, her powers fluctuate wildly. When she's in the Ultimates, she can move so fast that when Monica Rambeau is moving at light speed, she can actually see America moving.
Right,
and she's powerful enough to knock out Eldritch nightmares. But in her own story, she was probably about Spider-Man level strength, maybe 10 tons or so. And so it's weird. There's no consensus.
Young Avengers,
nobody's
you
created
need a
that
powerhouse, right? I mean, look who
Wasn't
they have
she-
so far. They needed a powerhouse on Young Avengers. They've got like Patriot, and they've got all these guys who are like, running around in the different shows that are obviously not as powerful as we see them to be or we are used to them being. So, I mean, unless young Loki is
like I said, it was
truly
weird
got the
because
powers of Loki.
in Ultimates, they make her. Ultimates already had like a Blue Marvel on the team, who is yet another Superman analog from Marvel, and they wildly amped up America from where she had been in like Young Avengers and whatnot. And then she gets her own series, and she's boom right back down to like low mid tier. And it's like, come on, guys, like where's the oversight? Where's the editorial?
Yeah.
So what I liked about this America is we actually see her powers evolve. And that was very pleasant to watch. We see as she spends a lot of time, as usual, I can't stand the snarky teenager trope, talking sass to somebody who's older, especially when you need that guy to save your butt.
Right.
But a lot of the time, she did a good job of like playing scared, being worried, trying to save herself and thereby save the universe. And we saw the evolution of her power throughout the movie, which was really great. She wasn't just like, the bestest ever all of a sudden.
Well,
and so that was nice. So I ended up
to be
liking this
fair,
character.
I mean, Doctor Strange tried to kill her in the first 2 minutes of the film. So she had a reason to feel a little snarky. But at the end of the film, she's saying, hey, trust this guy. He's a good guy.
But
so
I wouldn't feel, if I thought a guy might possibly kill me, snark is not where I'm going to go. It's going to be super cautious wariness, and I'm going to question everything you do. But I'm going to go like,
You're
I'm
clearly
gonna
not
call it
raising
like
a teenager.
Again, America had
a teenager who almost had her life sucked out of her. Like, I don't care how snarky you are. As soon as that happens, you're like, yeah, maybe I should zip the lip a little bit.
But she was willing. She was willing. So they were trying to show how she had this great character growth, that she was willing to lay down her life if need be, or trust him, or do what she needed to do. So
and I did like that about this presentation of the character.
I will say, and I don't know if they were aiming for this, and maybe it's just me because I've had this on the brain for some reason, but I like the actress. I thought she did a fine job. I just thought that her whole arc and the way she acted and everything else, and the story with her was save the cheerleaders, save yourself. So I thought it was pure heroes.
Yeah,
so
totally true.
So coming to the end of the film, and we get the two shocking moments at the end. We get with the third eye, whatever, and we get the appearance of Clea, which she just kind of goes with. But anyway, so I thought it was cool to see Charlize Theron as Clea. I'm glad they kind of introduced her. I'm glad if that means we're finally moving away from Christine, since that love is not reciprocated, since you already lose her in every dimension as far as Christine is concerned. So I'm glad we can let that go. Okay, so here comes Clea, and they actually were together for a while in the comics, and they actually can do some great things, and I think she's a great foil to him or whatever. So I felt good about that.
She looked good too.
Right. Well, I mean, she looked like she walked out of the comic. She was definitely believable. Yeah. In terms of the third eye showing up, and first it's like this terrible thing, and it's not that big of a thing, but you have to pay a price to use a dark hole, blah, 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 blah. So at the end, when Wanda, the thing that stops Wanda is, number one, that when she gets to the place where her kids are of the woman she's going to kill and replace with, they immediately see her as a monster, which I thought was more from an audience point of view. That's how we would react after the last 2 hours of the film.
Yeah.
They reacted immediately because remember, they've seen the Scarlet Witch costume before, but they reacted immediately like, stranger danger. They like freaked out. And that's
do we know these children have seen that costume before?
they saw something like that in WandaVision. They saw a classic costume.
But those weren't the same kids.
Those aren't the same kids. It's another dimension.
But you can't.
And
have
what
it
they're
both
seeing
ways.
is they're seeing her, beating on America Chavez. So they're seeing her like crushing another kid, basically. So obviously they see her as a bully in that sense.
I mean, honestly, when she first takes over the other Wanda, I thought she was just a powerless non-mutant or manipulated the whole movie until she, flew out of where the Book of the Vishanti was. I was like, well, why didn't she use her powers to fight Wanda off? That was kind of weird to me. At least in this scene, she tried to fight her a little bit with her powers before she got curved off.
Bizarre reaction to have them, out of all characters, react to Wanda that way. Number one, and number two, Wanda's so rattled by that. See, she's been determined to the point of sheer ruthlessness since we meet her in this film. But she's so rattled by that until it takes all the wind out of her sails.
Right.
And then the doppelganger she was going to kill was, says, know that they will be loved. And Wanda melts down and she relents and she starts crying. And I guess in that moment, maybe she finally saw herself. So it's not that I don't understand what the moment was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me feels like it wasn't really earned. It feels like it happened too easy based on everything that we've seen up to that point.
It felt like the end of WandaVision again.
Yeah.
I think it's just that they don't recognize her, right, as their mom. And I think that's the whole point, is she's so far gone that they can't even see her as being anything to do with their mother at this point. And she just realizes how far she's gone from what a mother should be and what she's supposed to be in any situation, right? So she kind of gets to see herself through their eyes and sort of figures out empathy that way. It's kind of ridiculous because it's empathy for yourself and these other kids. Like, it's empathy for her multiversal self, basically. But I think that that's what she sort of sees through their eyes, is she sees what they see and she sees the horror of herself, and she has to have their perspective, like another perspective looking at her, because she's not able to look inside herself. She needs their perspective to sort of understand how far, she's gone. And that's sort of that whole multiverse, is like looking at things from different perspectives, getting a different type of empathy, trying to see yourself as others would see you.
Well, it shows how far she's. Oh, go ahead.
I don't have empathy powers like you do, Mohammed. So, number two, you're doing what Bracy calls doing the work of the movie. Not that
that's what the movie's trying to say. That's what it's saying.
No, it's not that I can't buy what you're saying. I'm saying I don't think the movie set it up well enough. I don't think that final scene was earned because it's like, when the Terminator says at the end of T2, I know now why you cried. No, you don't. But we'll take it anyway, because we're supposed to believe that was more earned. Because in the deleted scenes, it says that the more Terminator is around humans, the more they understand human behavior, because that's how their processing should be set. Right. So that was more earned than Wanda being this ruthless killing machine that was even willing to kill a kid herself to get to her kids. And then one look at her and she's like, oh no, what is this or whatever? And she's so shaken by that. And she tried to talk to him and she's like, no, I'm not a monster. And they're like, And then that's enough to slow down all that energy and all that momentum and all that killing and all that ruthlessness. And she falls down on the floor and just melts. And her other self is like, sister to sister. I get what you were doing. I get why you did what you did, because I'm you. But you need to know that they will be loved. And that's enough. That doesn't feel right to me.
My take on
Mr. Fantastic's kids wouldn't have been loved. Yeah.
My take on the scene.
They're loved a lot less because they don't have a father now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, my take on the scene would have gone something like this, because I can buy into her seeing the horror reflected in the faces of her children, and that breaks her, because the other Wanda is just an obstacle to her. She's just one more body in the way. Right. I totally get that. And one thing the movie does that is very, very clever. So many times throughout the film, we see Wanda looking at her reflection, looking at her broken reflection, looking at her graven image. There are all these distorted images of herself. It shows that she cannot see what she's become, and she has to see it reflected in the eyes of these children, the horror and the expression. So I bought that. What I didn't buy was other Wanda forgiving her, because I feel like if this woman has actually had these children, had the actual birth, has raised them up the past 8 or 10 years to where they are now, That is the fierce Mother Wanda, and she just wipes out Scarlet Witch like Black Bolt wipes out Doctor Strange. And she says, like, I feel sorry for you, but you shouldn't have come for me and my children. And she just smokes her.
But she's smart enough to know she doesn't have that power, right? She is not Scarlet Witch. She doesn't have Darkhold. She doesn't have any of that.
Scarlet Witch has dropped all of her defenses.
I
think remember Wanda just about ripping Thanos apart atom by atom. I think that's
you
the Wanda
attack
that
her
comes
again,
out.
she puts those defenses go right back up. I think that's what she's realizing.
I think we're
She
getting
has
back to
crouch
one
this.
of the main problems, which is that the direction and the writing are not congruent. Because if you look at when we're talking about the mirrors, you're talking about the mirrors. The mirrors have been a really great theme throughout the movie, and all of it has been Raimi's visual direction. But it just doesn't gel with what's actually in the script.
Totally agree.
And because of that, you get these discongruencies.
I agree with Muhammad in that. I was going to go ahead. Go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, I agree with Muhammad that if you attack her, she's going to go right back into attacking. The problem is, I think all of you are being too nice to her, to be honest with you, in my opinion, because, once again, in her delusion, the only thing that snaps her out of this destruction that she's willing to do is the fact that the one part of her delusion that she, for whatever reason, is not willing to tamper with, she's not willing to make her own children, is seeing these children reject her, temporarily takes her out of what she's done and makes her have some introspection. However, and I feel sorry for her. I have some empathy to her. I will say that. But let's be honest. She took the coward's way out. She committed seppuku on her own instead of owning up to what she did and trying to have some make amends for what she's done on multiple universes. So while I have sympathy for her, while I have sympathy that she has definitely been a broken woman and has suffered through all this and has now been snapped out of this delusion and has reached a point where she just ends it, I don't see any of that as commendable at all.
Unless we think that the Darkhold is within her at this point, and unless she destroys herself, part of the Darkhold still survives. That was the only way I could make sense out of it.
Because even with the temple gone on Wundagore, Chthon's not dead. So there's that. But I disagree, Nim. I think her defenses don't go up. If she's broken by this, she pulls Jean Grey, because that's what she felt like in this film. She felt like the Dark Phoenix of the MCU. And the whole thing with with Professor X really solidified that for me, because they had the psychic battle, and there was this great what if where Jean just basically lobotomizes him slowly over time. And, Professor X even says, when he cures Dark Phoenix, he said, I wouldn't have won, but she was helping me fight her other self. And
Wanda's not Jean Grey. Wanda's much more headstrong than Jean Grey is, generally speaking, right? If
come on,
power of the Phoenix,
they're both bloody
they'd be going
redhead.
wild together.
Do we know how fiery they are?
Jean Grey was set up to be seduced and have the dark side of her brought out, and that's what helped the Phoenix Force take over. If she hadn't been seduced by Wingard, by Mastermind, maybe it wouldn't have happened. But I'm saying it was much more clear that Jean had been taken into a different headspace and how and why.
Right.
And she wasn't the girl that we knew. And she even says that when she first becomes Phoenix, which I thought was incredible. But what I'm saying here with Wanda's like we've been talking about all pile long. Wanda's always the person that we knew. Okay, she's still the person that we knew, maybe at a different extreme, but she's still the person that's always fighting for whatever her interests are at the moment and pulling out all the stops. This was just another level of it, which is why, again, when she comes to herself at the end, like I was just saying, I was just talking to one of my friends on Twitter, because this is the problem I have with Bucky, and they keep saying you can't compare Bucky and Wanda. I said, no, you misunderstand me. I'm not talking about the motivations. I'm talking about their victims. I'm talking about the fact that there is a swath of destruction with your name on it, regardless of what motivated you to do it. And the show and the movie keeps focusing on you, like you're the victim, or we should feel sorry for you, or you had your come to Jesus moment, so that made it all okay. And once again, I didn't buy it in WandaVision. I didn't buy it with. I never watched the end of Civil War, by the way, because I hate watching Iron Man and Captain America and Bucky fight, because I never blame Tony for being mad, because what else are you supposed to feel when you find out how your parents died and why? And so what I mean is, once again, the focus of everything is just Wanda, like Marsha from Brady Bunch. Just Wanda. And it's like, okay, so she figured out and she destroys the Darkhold and she kills herself. I'm like, but that doesn't bring anybody back that you killed, and then the version of yourself that's going to have to answer for the Illuminati death. She's just kind of high and dry, and she doesn't have your level of power. She can't do anything. And it's like what Nim said, you kind of took the coward way out. You took the coward's way out. You just took yourself out of the equation so there wouldn't be any consequences for you personally, but you didn't undo. It didn't undo a drop of what you did.
It's the age-old thing, and I'm telling you, this is something all over in American fiction. The idea that you can do really, really bad things and still love your grandma, right? That you can do all these bad things and you're still a good person because you go home to your family or you figure out some sort of like little thing at the end. And the real question is, can you do all this bad stuff and still be a good person? Is that even possible?
Yeah. And I don't think it is at a certain point. So, you know,
is there a point of
the point Wanda's gotten to, at least?
Wait.
Steve, what did you say? What did Steve say?
Not to the point that Wanda has gotten to.
Okay, that was my other question I stated at the beginning, is where is that tipping point? Because I think it's different for different people. I don't think it's a uniform kind of thing, but I'm like, me personally, Wanda lost me so long ago. I'm like, and then we have come up with several solutions that she could have implemented to make this thing less bloody and help her get to her kids quicker and make it more of what she said she wanted. But what she said she wanted was the same thing Walter White wanted, which was to vent her rage at the world because I've been hurt, so other people have to suffer. And I'm sorry, that makes you selfish. That is not heroic.
A good writer can bring anyone back from anything if you're a good writer. Look at what happened with Hal Jordan, right?
I've never liked Hal Jordan since then.
A good writer can bring anybody back from anything?
Yeah, but that was pretty much a mind control thing. That was always going to be on the cards.
No.
Yeah, well, you know, Jeff Johns played his games for sure.
I don't buy into the parallax. I don't buy into the Dark Phoenix being a different entity. Those characters were ruined the moment they killed all those other people. They were done. Right. They were toast.
Forever.
A giant stink bomb just got thrown in.
If you want a sympathetic villain, watch Stargirl. Here is a bunch of villains that we really enjoyed because they were ruthless, they were killers, but the difference is they believed 100% that they were doing a good thing. They thought they were heroes, and they went home and they kissed their wives and they loved their children, and they were something we can identify with. Yeah. Wanda knows how selfish she's being this whole film.
I think
she has no excuses.
I think the last thing I would say in response to Jeff with the defenses thing is that I think by the end of this movie, it's fairly obvious that the best weapon against Wanda is Wanda herself in her own mind. Wanda is mentally ill, you know, and I think that holds true to the character, is that a lot of times the worst enemy of people who are dealing with mental illness is themselves. They're their worst enemy, you know. And when you try and come at them externally, that's when the defenses and the combativeness goes up. And
Wanda's always responded to empathy, and she's always responded badly to conflict, right? That's just who she is.
But the Star Wars Extended Universe books that they decanonized and then started cannibalizing showed us what happened in the aftermath of the Emperor dying, because I've never bought into Vader killing the Emperor made up for him killing his kids and all the other thousands of people across the star systems they killed before Luke caught up with him, number one. But number two, in the EU books, we found out that's where Mara comes in. That everything didn't go back into Republic rule. Everything didn't just fall into place because the Emperor died, because his rule was so vast. And there were, you know, you can't just change people from imperial rule to democracy or whatever else you think. And I thought that was brilliant. So to me, that's always this kind of thing, is the aftermath. This is what I wish Strange had talked about a little bit more. The aftermath of everything that's happened.
Right.
What has been the net effect across the universes, in the multiverses, in the people that were impacted? And are we going to do anything to try and help them cope, or to try to make it up to them? or if there anything we can do to restore what's been lost, if at all possible. And there's no discussion of that. That's what bothers me.
So you got to get another great season like Falcon and Captain America, and or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and you can deal with the aftermath of this as well. But nobody liked that. They all complained about that. That was what that was all about, right?
Well, I want to worship at the feet of the writer that can redeem Sauron. That's all I want to say. If you can redeem Sauron. I want to learn from the master if somebody could do that.
I would give Saruman a chance before Sauron.
Yeah.
So let me throw it out again for any things we didn't cover. Any things you guys want to throw out before we wrap up?
Yeah, I want to step on this landmine, and no, I want to jump on the landmine.
Uh-oh.
All right, so let's go into America Chavez real quick here. So we get her thoughts. We see her two moms. We see her strange parallel dimension, which doesn't look like any of the others, because unfortunately the movie doesn't have time to do this. There's so much going on already, and it's kind of funny that they went this direction, because they've even changed her origin in the comics to make her an actual native Earth-born Latino woman instead of being an alien from another dimension called the Utopia Parallel, where all the men got wiped out on their original planet. It's such a convoluted origin. Only the women can be saved. They came over this other dimension created by Wiccan, and somehow through magic or science, they found a way for women to reproduce with other women. And it would have been so much easier just to show like a Earth scene setting if they're going to go ahead and, Marvel Comics has made her like a Latina woman as opposed to an alien. Just show her in like, the Brooklyn or the LA or, whatever city they want to put her in. And that's her two moms. And, they're just a modern day lesbian couple. But instead they made the whole alien thing. And so I know a lot of people would know nothing about this character. They're first getting introduced to this character. They're all going like, well, what the hell was that all about? We don't get it, So it's a weird can of worms. And now there's going to be, it's kind of like the discussions I've been hearing about Lightyear when they introduced the lesbian couple in there, and Buzz meets the daughter of his friend, and they look just alike, and they're like, and now like, oh, I got to explain to my kids how this happened because it doesn't quite make sense in the mind of like my 5-year-old. So it's a weird can of worms that they opened up there in my estimation, considering how absolutely janky and convoluted the original story of America Chavez is there. I think they should have just gone with the retcon of her origin and just made her like, oh, I'm the daughter of a lesbian couple in a modern day Earth-like society. So I don't know why they chose to do that, and it was weird to throw it in there. You didn't even have to throw it in there. I think I would have saved that for her own project, be it her own movie or her own Disney Plus show.
Well, we're going to be seeing a lot more of her. I guarantee that.
Joy! I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
They're clearly trying to set up Young Avengers one by one.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
right.
Well, I have said it many times. If Marvel wants 10 to 12 more years of movie domination, they should have gone with the X-Men or the Fantastic Four.
X-Men always sells. X-Men always sells.
And I'm definitely feeling some Avengers fatigue, especially with all these extra TV shows. And so building back up at this point, like I was talking about before, I don't think they have their finger on the pulse of what people might want, because we have to care. See, we cared about the original Avengers to get to Infinity War and Endgame. We cared about their stories and their journeys. But who do we care about enough on whoever the team is now to go through Secret Wars or Secret Invasion or whatever? Maybe Spider-Man. You throw Spider-Man in there.
Right.
But I don't feel like it has the same type of weight or cohesion or caring or from the audience. I could be wrong.
I like Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I'm an outlier. So,
Yeah, I like Paul Rudd's Ant-Man and the Wasp quite a bit. But I'll also say like the X-Men is such a no-brainer. It's a well-known brand for a very long time. The last movies were successful, more or less. The cartoons, a lot of people remember. And if you want to go with like diversity and powerful women, man, the X-Men is gold. You don't have to race or gender swap anybody. The X-Men is like the Star Trek of the comic books. You've got people from all across the globe, and the most powerful characters in the X-Men ever since the second generation of them have always been the women. That's the mine you ought to be digging into right there if that's where you want to go with things. The X-Men's perfect for that.
But if Sony's the reason that Spider-Man was as good as it was compared to the Eternals and this film, then put Sony in charge. Like, I mean, change it around. Give it some.
I don't disagree. Make another deal.
Give it some focus again, because I think ultimately speaking, people want to see their heroes be heroes, and I completely agree with that. And they did a good job of that in that film. People got excited. It obviously made double the amount that this movie made, with ostensibly the same kind of star power, if not more here in terms of the cameos. So I think ultimately speaking, they need to figure out how to center back on the characters we care about for sure. I think that's got to be their mission.
We need a reason to
they're strip mining like a lot of the properties, and it just seems like they're not really focusing on the characters we care about.
But maybe Fantastic Four and X-Men are going to be the breath of fresh air they need, because
that's what we need.
They're starting from scratch.
And I'm not opposed to them going with like D-listers, third stringers, or even new characters, because look at what a brilliant job they did with Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah,
it's just really about focus and caring and having that oversight. Especially if you want to have that narrative through line, we need somebody like I don't know what's happened to Feige. He seems lost focus. He's letting other people do things. But if you're not going to do it, man, we need somebody who can.
You need comic fans that are a little bit crazy. That's what you need. And that's what James Gunn brought to the franchise. Yeah. Obviously, the Russos had the fandom in them. I mean, you need fans. You need people that have a little bit of a creative spirit about it, but they're going to come back to the characters in the end. And then you can reinvigorate the entire universe. It can be done with the X-Men.
Secret Invasion ends up being a cop-out, and everything we've been looking at up to this point has actually been Skrulls.
Oh, geez.
That's going to be a bad retcon. That is not the thing.
They're never going to make the Skrulls the bad guys, I don't think.
God knows that's going to be that Dallas moment if they go that way. It's like, it was all a dream.
James Gunn made us all care about Peacemaker. That's all I gotta say. So,
and the Suicide Squad in general.
Yeah.
Talk about genius.
Yeah. I mean, come on. And enough said. You just mic drop right there. So,
all right, we're gonna end it there. But I think this was a really good discussion, and I definitely think we could do more. There's so many themes, so many different ways it could have gone. I will say, after this discussion, it's even more apparent to me that, because I said this before, I told you I wasn't going to remember everything, but I said this before. This was actually 2 to 3 movies.
Yeah.
And each one of those movies would have been fun to see.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 2 to 3 movies kind of sandwiched into one. And, maybe in another universe, we actually got to see all 3 movies, because this really should have been a trilogy of films. And we could have gotten those cameos. We couldn't have gotten the exploration of the different rabbit holes that we've mentioned. We could have gotten a more overall cohesive thing. But the main thing, besides all those other things I just mentioned, that we needed is the typical MCU, this is leading to something. I know people complained about the post-credit scenes, and I know people complained about how it became a Marvel staple, but they had the desired effect.
Right.
It whetted your appetite for the next installment and let you know that something bigger is actually happening and we're going towards something. When you start making movies that are relatively self-contained or offshoots of the TV shows or just sequels to one other film or whatever, you take away from some of that. Once you get your audience used to that kind of formula, they lose interest when you get them off of it. And so that's what I mean when I say, if we had seen the Skrulls in a trilogy of films, if we had gotten a sense that, like if there had been a quick cameo and we see somebody turn into a Skrull and then back into that thing, if there had been something like that peppered in this film, then that's enough to make you curious to maybe say, well, is the next thing Secret Invasion? Let's see that. But this was, once again, as big as it was in action sequences, it was very small in scope. It was about Wanda.
Right.
And so it kind of lives and dies in its own space because of that.
Yeah.
Like
I will make the prediction that in the second week of July, we're going to be having different conversations than we are right now. So we'll see what happens.
Because
of the film that's coming out at that point.
Which is
which is Thor.
Thor, Love and Thunder.
Doubt
not
it.
seeing that one.
I'm gonna bet we're gonna be having
not
different
I
thrilled
hope
for
you're
this
right.
movie.
That's all I'll say.
I will reserve judgment. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay,
I am not thrilled for silly Dayglow Thor.
well, y'all check it out and let me know how that goes.
Well,
All
we're
right.
gonna have a direction, or we're gonna have momentum. That's my
Although-
prediction.
My mother-in-law's not happy about Chris Hemsworth not being Thor, so I will say that. So
Yeah,
she likes her eye candy. So
just tell him he is. Just tell her he is
Well,
Thor.
he does
Oh,
get all
yeah,
his clothes knocked off in one scene, Jen.
well, yeah, I could tell her that he has a butt shot and she'll be there. She'll spend.
Oh my
money,
god,
so.
my kids are gonna love that. Yeah, they're gonna laugh so much.
Well, y'all enjoy that. We should have seen Better Ray Bill, but okay, y'all go ahead on and have Thor in chains with his drawers on. Y'all have.
Listen, I'm all for Beta Red Bill. They got to bring that in. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to thank my co-host. Thank you so much, Nims.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed / Ziggy / Dr. Jafre.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Bracy.
Hey, always a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank you for inviting Ziggy as a guest. It's been really fun to have such a lively debate with somebody because we don't always all agree, and I think this has been one of the most passionate back and forths we've had since the Alien versus Predator movie.
Oh, wait, remember when I tried to defend the Batman against all of you? So.
Yeah, but I was all about AVP too, man. Like you guys, like that movie is horrible.
It is, but you made it better. You made it sound better than it was. Let's just put it that way.
You definitely did. Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that Ziggy could be here. I know we've talked off and on for quite a while on Twitter.
Absolutely.
And it's nice to finally meet you. So
Yeah.
thanks for
It's been
coming.
more than 10 years. Absolutely.
We ought to bring him in for Kenobi because that sounds like that's going to be a fun debate again.
Oh man,
Oh my goodness, Kenobi.
I loved Kenobi so much. Yeah.
We shall cross the sabers, sir.
I think that will be an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. All right, y'all. That's it for this episode. Concluding our talk about Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, and me and this crew and other fun guest stars. We'll see you next time on the next episode of Sloppy Spoilers.
See you later, everyone.
Good night, guys.